Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody, good morning. I guess people will be straggling in. But, you know, we got a lot to do. And of course we won't be meeting next week because that's Christmas Day. You know, we could, but I don't want to be too sacrilegious like that. And then the week after that is New Year's Day. So I guess we'll be getting back together in January. But in the meantime, we got a lot to do, reading-wise and so on. I'll tell you something about that, a proposal that Michelle Yu made about reading. And but today we want to do three major things, let's put it that way. The crisis of the Democratic Party and the Biden administration. And that's a whole big thing, we'll get to that. The recent statements of District Attorney Krasner and what that said, what it means, and then some things about the life and death of bell hooks. And you know, that'll be a little more complicated, but just a few things. And then what next year perhaps will look like for the free school, including the celebration of the 10th anniversary of the free school. You know, let me just start with this. You know, James Baldwin had a very colorful, maybe that doesn't describe what I want to say, but a very profound phrase. He talked about a long meantime. Now, everybody knows when you say in the meantime, you know, in other words, while I'm waiting to get something, I'm going to make do with what I have. So you say, well, you know, I don't have no money, but in the meantime, I'm going to make do. I don't have a girlfriend, but in the meantime, I'll make do. You know what I'm saying? That makes sense to y'all? Make it very concrete, existential. So, but the concept of the long meantime is an ironic kind of thing, because in the meantime means in the short run, but a long meantime means that the meantime, in the meantime, might last for an extended period, you know? And in a lot of ways, when we look at the situation at this time in the United States, words like the long game, the long meantime apply. Because unless we can think about the long game, the long meantime, it's very difficult to analyze the moment. One of the great problems for the left, and you know, Johan and I were just talking about this, was the fact that they had no long game. Everything was the immediate. And so a lot of hyperbolic language, such as, you know, we talked about Cornel West and the whole thing of, we have a neo-fascist thug in the White House. You know what I'm saying? Without any understanding of fascism, neo-fascism, or whatever. But it was to get an immediate effect. The, quote, Black Lives Matter movement was one of those movements that claimed to be something that it wasn't. It was never a civil rights movement. It was never about black life. It was about electing Biden. It was a Democratic Party along with the nonprofit industrial complex, of course the corporate media, etc. that said we will use this to delegitimize and morally smear everybody that votes for Trump. You know? So the left jumped on board. Well, we have to put quotes, because what is the left? You know, the left is AOC because she says she's left. The left is Bernie Sanders. The left is whoever wants to be called left for the time. Well, is it the left of the Democratic Party? Okay, maybe that's what you are. But that includes a lot of people, including the Communist Party of the United States, sadly, including the Democratic Socialist of America, sadly, you know, of course, AOC, that's the left of the Democratic Party. What do they do? What is their function? Their function is to be left gatekeepers. If there's an attempt to leave the Democratic Party from the left, they're going to cancel you. You're a collaborationist with the neo-fascist thugs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they do not have power to control the Democratic Party, even though they're high profile. They got millions of followers on Twitter and other social media platforms. But the substance of political power they do not have, you know? But what do? They are like, you know, in your family, you know, everybody is talking a lot of trash, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you got somebody come in, I'm gonna expose all of y'all. You know, let's say you're from a family that sells drugs on the down low, right? And you have a brother that's down with you, but he ain't getting what he wants, so now he's gonna go tell on you. So that's kind of what the left of the Democratic Party does. They're like the snitches. And to keep things under control, no left critique. There is no left serious critique of the Democratic Party. You see what I'm saying? And so they give a kind of veneer of legitimacy. Oh, look, we're the New Deal coalition of the 1930s. Oh, we got the Democrats, the normal Democrats, the centrists, the corporate Democrats, and then we got these cultural leftists, you know, transgender, same-sex marriage, abortion, you know, all the cultural things. How would you say the other thing is the anti-white supremacists, you know, the 16, 19. Oh, we're all in this thing together with Joe Biden. You know, and Joe Biden, as I always say, you guys wouldn't know about this, but back before he was shuffled, when he could put two sentences together coherently, believe me, hey, you talking about arrogance. You're talking about the crime bill of 1994, the black predators, lock them up. You know, he was like a bully, drank hard whiskey day and night. You know, player, all of that. I mean, really, you know, not a bad looking guy back in his days, wore the best suits, you know, kept himself suave. But now, how do you make him the Franklin D. Roosevelt of the 2020? How are you going to do that? You can't. It's a hard sell. That's why you need a left couple to sell him to the rebellious young people, to the rebellious people in the black community, in the labor movement, who's saying, nah, this don't work. You're not going to use me on election day and forget about me after that. Like Malcolm X said, you put him first and he put you last. You know what I'm saying? No, we're not. So you need a left to keep explaining to you, a quote left, explaining to the people that no, it's not what you think, and if you don't have him, you're going to have fascism, right? That's the role of the left. And sadly, Cornell kind of functions that way. You know, I'll say a little bit more about that, but it's very important to understand the positioning of different political groupings within this, quote, broad ruling class movement. And that's what it is, called the Democratic Party. You know, the ruling class movement that calls itself the Democratic Party. The thing that you guys got to pay close attention to, you know, there is very little below the surface. It's a very superficial configuration. It's a top-down. And whenever you have top-down movements, and this, I don't care if you study the Russian Revolution, whether you study the any revolution, whenever it's top-down, it only gets so far from the top. And there is very little at the grassroots or mass level. You see what I'm saying? So all of this at the top, you know, it stays there. All of their academic experts, all of their politicians and intellectuals and cultural this, that, and the other, you know, which can always be on television and social media. Well, they are to make people believe that there's more to this coalition than there actually is. And believe me, there's very little there. Very little. And, you know, perhaps Joe Biden is the right man for this time, for this ruling class. If you feel where I'm coming from. He deserves them, and they deserve him. It is pure rank opportunism. And we'll talk more about that, especially when we get to Larry Krasner. And I hope some of my friends are listening to this, because I'm going to talk to them, because they need to be talked to. But the Democratic Party, starting with the Biden administration, is now facing what I would call an existential crisis. And this is not just about the Democratic Party, because all of the establishment Republicans, all of the, quote, conservatives in the media, in academia, have all abandoned what is now the Trump Party. Quite interestingly, in 2016, Trump, while campaigning, predicted that he would fundamentally change the Republican Party and make of it a working class party. These are his words, and if you go to Politico and put something like that in their search engine, I think you will find that statement. And in fact, the Republican Party is made up of the majority of the working class. The only group in the working class that is holding out at this point are black workers. But not because they are so committed to the Democratic Party. They just have not made up their mind. Mexican and other Latino workers are going in droves from the Democrats to the Trump Party. Well, the entirety, almost all of the white working class are over there, you know. And as a consequence, you're seeing throughout the country Republicans running for state office, running for Congress, who are talking more about working class issues, including universal health care and other things. This phenomena has been reported on in Politico. I don't know, Joe, maybe you have seen more of these essays, but it's all over the place. So the Democratic Party today is the party of the greatest concentration of wealthy people of any political party in human history. There's never been a political party where all billionaires are in it. You know what I'm saying? It is the party of extreme wealth and power. And it is the party that is committed to the ruling class holding on to power. That's what it functions for these days. Let me put that another way. The Democratic Party does not have a program for the people. In spite of what they say, I want to cut to the essence. Its function is to ensure that the ruling class holds on to power. The vast majority of those in the ruling class, I'm not just talking about the billionaires, when we talk about the ruling class, this is not an economic definition or identity. Sure, it is the billionaires, but it is all of those who are committed to holding on to the capitalist mode of production in this moment of deep crisis. That is the ruling class. The majority of the ruling class is made up of bureaucrats, politicians, intellectuals, career civil servants, that type of thing. They're all the ruling class. You know, the FBI, you know, all of those, the top ranks of the military. That is what we call the ruling class, you know, and they rule not just in the interest of, let us say, the richest people or the most wealthy people, but they rule in the interest of a system. A system. And not just a system that rules and dominates this country, but a world system. So the fractures that we see domestically are also more profound globally. And this is big. This is huge. But the immediate crisis, Joe Biden, not even a year as president, not even a year, running on, you know, I'm going to get everybody vaccinated, we're going to bring COVID under control, and the country will be back to normal, the economy will begin to grow at rates that we haven't seen, and I'm going to govern as a progressive. In other words, I'm proposing $3.5 trillion. Everybody get out of jail. We defund, you know, everything you ever heard of that you ever want. It's going to be like you died and went to heaven. You know, working class, middle class, come on back to the ruling class. We can run this thing. You know, give up on this rebellion, all this anger. We're going to buy you off in the short term. But then it didn't work out. It didn't work out. You know, part of the reason it politically was not going to work out is that the Trump party and every Republican, I don't care what she or he says, that remains in the Republican Party has to accept the dominance of Trump and his forces. I don't care if you're Mitch McConnell or the woman who's a senator from Maine, the so-called moderates. If you're in the Republican Party, you have to accept that leadership. It is the decisive force in the Republican Party, which is the Trump Party, probably, and I'll get back to this, the most important political force in the country. Let me just say quickly, that's what the Virginia gubernatorial race showed. Because it was a face-off between a Republican, moderately Trump, not a Trumpist in the quote extreme sense, but enough of Trump to let you know what time of day it was, and Terry McAuliffe. Terry McAuliffe is not just a cat running for office. He is a huge player in the Clinton wing of the Democratic Party. Huge. And when he began to get into trouble in that race, look who came down. Obama. Biden, as they say, shuffling along. Kamala, yeah, she came down. In other words, the two wings that are fighting for control of the White House, the Obama wing and the Clinton wing, they united to save Terry McAuliffe. And then after he lost, they went back to war with each other. And we'll get back to that. But this White House and this presidency is probably facing a crisis the likes of which no president has faced in the first year or less than a year in office. In other words, there's the first 100 days where, everything is yada, 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 love fest. That's, hold hands and sing kumbaya across the party divisions. He never had that. Immediately, the Republicans went to war with him. Well, what were they saying? Well, you say we don't accept the 2020 election. Did y'all accept the 2016 election? No. And that is what provoked what is happening now in a lot of ways. Don't forget, Trump wasn't even inaugurated, and they were saying that the Russians elected him. Remember that? Russiagate. Now we know that was a full lie, And then you're going to impeach the man twice. Oh, yeah. I mean, come on, y'all. It just became a circus to delegitimize him. And then in 2020, he lost the popular vote, but he got more votes than any Republican has ever gotten. And the interesting thing is his, quote, coalition, which I call a coalition of the angry and dissatisfied, not a coalition of the white supremacists. That is a smear invented by the Democratic Party. It is not that. And how do I know it is not that? I know it is not that because of the statistical breakdown of the 2016 election. 70% of those majority white counties that voted for Obama twice voted for Trump. Oh, so they were white, they were anti-white supremacists in 2008 and 2012, and then in 2016 they became white supremacists again. I don't think so. 13% of the people that voted for Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary voted for Trump. Thank you. Were they anti-white supremacists in the Democratic primary when they voted for Bernie, but then they became white supremacists in November? Then, of course, and this is how I knew it was a coalition of the dissatisfied. Black folk did not vote. Now, black people are a particular political category. They don't operate like any other group, believe me. You almost have to know them. You almost, it's not complete, but you gotta almost be black and live black and been around black political activity for some time to see it. They quietly abstain. You see what I'm saying? You're not gonna raise no hell, quietly abstain. Some voted for Trump. I know people who came to me secretly and said, look, Tony, don't tell my children, but I voted for Trump. I said, why'd you do that? She said, because I detested the weak way that Obama responded to the murder of Trayvon Martin. I have a son that's Trayvon Martin's age. He likes Skittles, and he wore a hoodie what Obama did to make it look like, ha ha ha, let's get on with business. She said, my vote was a vote of protest. Trump won Pennsylvania. No Republican had won Pennsylvania in almost 40 years, presidential race. What was it? A couple of things. One, in Philadelphia, black folk did not turn out in adequate numbers. That quiet abstaining, you know? It was this, a coalition of the dissatisfied and angry, which still exists, that was the key to the electoral college victory of Donald Trump. Now, in the United States, we have to understand the electoral college. The US is not a parliamentary system. You know what I'm saying? It's two parties, you know, in these national elections. So if you don't have an electoral college, it literally means that California, New York, Texas, Illinois, the big states will decide every election, because that's where the majority of the population is. With this kind of system, which I'm not defending, but it says that a state like Vermont or Idaho has some, how do they say, they're part of the game. You know, that's why you have that. So now they say, well, we want to overturn the electoral college. Well, you didn't want to overturn it when it played to your favor. You know, I mean, these Democrats crack me up. Oh, we're down with the filibuster until it doesn't work for us. Either you're down or you're not down. You know, but the ruling class never accepted as legitimate Trump's election. Never did. And they hounded him for 4 years. And it was unbelievable. Nothing like that had ever happened. Nothing. No president had ever experienced what he experienced. A lot of people say, well, he deserved it because he's a cold-blooded white supremacist. Oh, go ahead, yeah. Yeah. Oh, they want to hold. We got to hold up a minute. They want to use
Yeah. Thank you so much. Excuse me.
No, no problem. Very flexible. Really, we know how to keep it moving. It's all good. Oh, we cool. Oh.
That's already up.
Well, I was going to take a joke. Well, I'll hold on. My jokes have a way of morphing into cursing and profanity, and I'm in the church. But anyway, no president had ever experienced that. And his people, and then of course, to label every white person that voted for Trump as a white supremacist. That what we were experiencing is a crisis of historic proportions, and it continues to this day. We'll come back to that. By the way, you know, there's an article, I guess Jerry and Joe and myself will talk about it, an article in the New York Times which cites a number of academic studies and what academic researchers in elite universities And when you say academic research searches in elite universities, what you are saying, by saying that, that's a long way of saying puppets of the ruling class. That's really what they are. And so their concept is to defend the existing order and the existing class relations of political power. But we'll come to that in a minute. But everybody is, to make a long story brief, everybody at the elite level is in a state of anxiety and pessimism. And it kind of boils down to one phrase: we're losing our democracy. You know, but then at the level of the grassroots, it's a different narrative, and it pivots in the immediate sense, not in some high ideological, political sense of, quote, we're losing our democracy, but there are three big issues that affect across the board the masses of people. One, inflation. Now, you know, we in the free school began talking about inflation about 4 or 5, maybe earlier, months ago. This is when all of the economic experts, including Yellen, who is the Secretary of the Treasury, and she was at one time the chairman of the Federal Reserve, so she's supposed to know everything, and a wise woman and all that, and the adult in the house, and others came out with the same, well, don't worry about inflation, it's only transitory. But now they're all saying, this is more dangerous than we thought. This is, and it is. Now they said that in November, inflation jumped to about 6.8%. But let me tell you, when they give you inflation percentages and numbers, they're not talking about your experience or my experience with inflation, because they don't include in it the things that we buy. Fuel, like gas and heating oil, and food. That's not included. So you can see a 30, 40, 50% increase in gas at the pump, then everybody gets afraid. Well, how am I going to heat my house in the winter? Or how am I going to get to work? Or it doesn't include when you go to the market and you say, well, it's Christmas time, I'm going to buy a turkey. And then you see the price, you say, no, I'm not going to buy a turkey. Let me get some ground beef and have hamburgers. You know what I'm saying? Or you go and say, I'm going to buy a loaf of bread. You look at the price. I don't think so. We just have to eat rice. You know. But anyway, this is where it is hitting the people. So the experience of the masses of people with inflation is vastly different than what these elite economists living in condos and drinking only the most expensive scotch and brown liquor and gin. But, you know, I mean, they're living good, so it don't affect them like it affects us. So inflation. Let me tell you about inflation. I'll say it again and again and again. It is, of all economic events, the most politically consequential because of it, the breadth of the effect. You know, everybody don't be unemployed, even if you got high unemployment, right? But everybody feels inflation. It is the most politically consequential. You know, now, by politically, I mean consequential in terms of, let's take this, the upcoming congressional elections. The Democrats are going to be wiped out, no question about it. Everybody knows that, they've accepted it. So, yeah, they're going to be wiped out. So that's why they're trying to get on with the January 6th investigation, because that's going to be over in a couple months. You know what I'm saying? And that's why Bannon and them are saying, hey, man, lock me up. You know, you're making me a revolutionary hero. And he's delusional. He's like, I'm the Lenin of the right. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Hey, they don't care. Now, you've got cats, weak cats, they're giving over stuff. But most people, they're saying, lock me up. The January 6th people, they got one cat, he gonna do about 5 years, you know, whatever. You know, for throwing a fire extinguisher at a police officer. But they want to get on with this and see if they can stop the bleeding. Because if they get wiped out in 2022, next year, which means not only the House, we know the House is gone, but probably the Senate. The Senate, which means we're back to where we started with in 2016. And thus begins next year, after the dust clears, we begin the presidential election, which is not just the election for president, but what will be the configuration of power in this country. Very consequential election, and we have to understand it, and that's why we have to understand what this quote left is, because they're going to come out with all of the propaganda. They're going to be talking loud and saying nothing, trying to confuse the masses, because the ruling class is in a fight for its life. Inflation, that's number one. And it doesn't look like it's going to abate. Once inflation gets out of control, people start doing crazy things, even ordinary people, like turning to cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin. You know, I got a cat that I listen to called Max Kaiser, and his answer to everything is Bitcoin. Bitcoin. But don't nobody know what Bitcoin is, except Samir, and he still ain't explained it. So I said, well, what is blockchain? Well, blockchain is if you do this and I do that. So don't nobody know what Bitcoin or crypto. You know what crypto means? Crypto means, I was going to say fake, crypto, disguise. So you say cryptocurrency. It's something like currency, but it really ain't currency. So you say, well, I know what it's like to hold $1 in my hand, but I don't know what it's like to have $1 million in crypto. And then when they go to this thing of mining crypto, what you talking? See, this is what you call a Ponzi scheme. A few people know what the game is, and everybody else has been sold that since these people said, I made $100 million on crypto in 6 months. You understand? It's just like Jane Fonda saying, do aerobics, you live forever. And now she got osteoporosis. I mean, I'm serious. I said, wait a minute, I thought I was supposed to live forever if I did aerobics. Yeah, she's one, no, Jane Fonda's one that came out with aerobics. Y'all didn't know that, did you?
I know that.
Yeah, check it out. She started that. You know, and it was a sexy thing, you know, because she had on leotards and jumping around and all that. Yeah. A lot of brothers, oh my God, I'm going to live forever. But anyway, oh God, let me get my head together. But you don't, so everybody's saying, look, the dollar is being devalued. All sovereign currencies, that is currencies that are backed up by a government, are going down, except the Chinese renminbi. And maybe the North Korean currency, because they act like they ain't worried about nobody. Hey, look, North Korea is They say, look, y'all do y'all, but don't come up in here. There used to be a song called Armed and Extremely Dangerous. And that's what the North Koreans said. We armed and extremely dangerous. And you see what we got, you know, and don't, I mean, I love them people. I love that. Huh? Yeah, you got to love them.
No COVID either.
No, huh?
No COVID, because no one's going.
No, ain't nobody got COVID. You can't come in and you can't come out. You understand? They locked the border with China. South Korea ain't coming in there. You know, nobody from the white world is allowed up in there. So hey, we ain't got no COVID. Everybody's eating. You know, and we got weapons. And if the United States think they're gonna come over here with nuclear weapons on us, we can touch you. That's what you know, in boxing. You could touch me and I can touch you. And let's see who gets touched the hardest. But it's a beautiful thing. No country in history has ever done what they have done. And they are worthy of a real study because they teach the world resilience, how to unite a people. And it is the unity of the people that decides history. Okay. Inflation. Raging could become hyperinflation, which means then we back to Germany in the 1920s. Cat got a wheelbarrow full of German marks. Somebody said, hey dog, where you going with all that money? I'm going shopping. He said, going shopping? I said, yeah, man, a loaf of bread is $500,000. So I'm going to buy a loaf of bread, a quart of milk, and a chicken. That's why I need $5 million. Really. And like in Zimbabwe, it got so bad over there, the government said, y'all think you're poor now? Look, I'm going to give everybody my print money. Give everybody money. So they printed so much money, a dollar was worth half a penny. So so inflation can get out of hand. I mean, and it has in human history. And it happens when a state no longer has control politically, where ruling class has lost control. So when you talk about inflation, you're talking about an economic event, but that quickly becomes a profound political event and threatens the sovereignty or the rule of a ruling class. And since the dollar is the global reserve currency, which means that not only is it privileged, because everybody needs dollars if they're going to trade on the world scale. It's a very, money is a very funky thing. You got every kind of theory of money that you can imagine. You understand? Like what they got the new theory of money.
Yeah, modern monetary theory.
Modern monetary theory. Just print all the money you need. Don't worry about it. Let the good times roll. That's a blues song. I don't care if you're young and old. Let the good times roll. Drink all that whiskey. Get some fentanyl too in your weed. Hey, but the good times come to an end. You can only party but so long. And then you're back to basics. What is money? What does money represent, if not labor? Past labor. When you got $1 in your pocket, that represents that you worked. You dig what I'm saying? You ain't got no money. Either it's the labor of other people that you're living off of. I mean, like on welfare, unemployment. I'm not talking about the rich now. But if you got money, it represents labor. So labor don't count no more. The labor theory of value ain't in play no more, right? We ultra supply side economists, ultra libertarians. Don't nothing count no more. It's what, if you say I'm down, I'm down. It's like identity politics of economics. And identity politics don't go but so far. Like identity, you feel good for about 2 years. And then you say, now I'm back to basics. I'm super black, I'm blacker than black, I'm kill the white man and all that. And then suddenly I got to go to work and get a job to pay my rent. And black don't pay the bills. I need a job. So economic fundamentals have a way of asserting themselves through a lot of bullshit. You understand? Okay. I'm not going to say anything more about inflation, but I just recommend one book. The only book of classical political economy since Marx, or since the high point of classical political economy. And that is John Maynard Keynes. His last name spelled Keynes. You know how to spell John Maynard. His book, General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money, where the fundamental categories of capitalist political economy are reinterrogated. You know what I'm saying? In other words, Keynes, in order to understand finance capital and the crisis, had to re-interrogate, re-explore the fundamental categories of political economy. Categories that first arise with the English political economists. You know what I'm saying? Just basic shit. You know what I'm saying? Like if you're going to treat cancer, don't say you're going to treat cancer and you're a cosmologist. At least have some background in biology. Oh no, I'm gonna cut on you. I don't, like that commercial. Somebody fall out, the person run over. And she said, "Everybody be careful." Somebody say, "Are you a doctor?" "No, but I watched a lot of it on television." I watched a lot of doctor sitcoms. So, but there are fundamental things to any explanation of natural or human relationships. There's certain fundamentals. And when I talk about bell hooks in a moment, I'm going to explain how postmodernism said that fundamentals don't matter anymore, and what that has meant. Right? But anyway, okay, now, the second thing that is leading to this crisis is the persistence of COVID. It ain't going away no time soon. In this country. North Korea, they may have shut it down. South Korea doing pretty good. China, 1.4 billion people, but they handling it. You know what I'm saying? They said there was a port city and one case came up, they shut the whole city down. Everybody go home and chill. Chill out, man, until we get this under control. But because the government has legitimacy and has a relationship with its people, it can say that. Everybody went home and said, chill. Am I going to get paid? Yeah, you're going to get paid. Don't worry about it. We got you. But over here, people say, shoot, you lied to me about this and you lied about that. You probably lied about that. And I'm a conspiracy theorist and I don't believe nothing you say. So I'll die before I get vaccinated. You see, you got that problem. Just like you got the problem of people not taking jobs. That is a judgment upon a ruling class that they do not believe and do not trust, and especially young people. Why should I go to work? I can't buy a house. If I don't have a job, I can't pay my student loans, and I don't want to pay them because you overcharged me and you didn't give me nothing in return. You know what I'm saying? So people are leaving society, are retreating from society. Jeremiah just showed me an article. For people 18 to 45, the major cause of death is fentanyl overdose. Of all deaths, not just drug deaths, of all deaths, fentanyl overdose in this country.
More than heart disease and all that?
Huh?
18 to 45.
18 to
Oh,
45.
right.
18 to 45. In other words, the same people that are opting out of the economy. You see what I'm saying? There's an overlap here. But COVID, remember Biden when he was in his cellar running for president? And there's a reason he never came out. They didn't want people to see how frail he is. So he said he ran in the election against Trump based on Trump's mishandling of the COVID pandemic. Remember? In fact, they said it. We have to make Trump pay for his denial of COVID in the early months and his mishandling of it going forward. Now it turns out that more people have died of COVID under Biden than under Trump, with no end in sight. So they say get yourself vaccinated, and then now get your booster. And now you might need a booster every year. You know what I'm saying? Okay, then they came out and said Johnson & Johnson is fake, it ain't working. So you get people who have been vaccinated getting infected. So now they say, well, don't worry about it because you don't have to be hospitalized and you ain't going to die. Then it came out somebody just died. So, like they say, you got 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. So who do you believe? But at any rate, it is causing profound anxiety. And people are looking at Biden. I thought you said when you got in, things are going to get back to normal and everybody going to get vaccinated and you understand what I'm saying? Then we could celebrate Thanksgiving and Christmas. We could ride on planes, and there's an old boogie down Broadway. We can get it on, Just have party like it's 1999. This was the promise, right? Okay. COVID is back. And then the third thing, and this is deep, growing violence in cities. In cities governed by Democrats. So if you're in Philadelphia, Mayor Kenny, DA Krasner, head of City Council, Darrell Clark, my girl, Helen Gibb. And I dig Helen, but look, girl, you can't play that ambitious thing. You got to be more principled. You know what I'm saying? Ambition and principle don't go together. They don't. They really don't. And one gonna give way to the other. And she's very smart, but she's running for mayor. Let's be real. Okay. You've been running for mayor, and so on. But everybody, we got to get Trump out of there. Everybody come out to vote. If we don't have, and they tell black people, you don't get Trump out of there, we're going to be back in slavery next month. Yeah, they told us that we're going back into slavery. They're going to take the right to vote away. Ain't nobody going to take no right to vote away in Philadelphia from black people. Really? So they told us all of this. And then they had these crazies running around, defund the police, abolish all the prisons. If somebody gets shot, call a social worker. Call a social worker? I got somebody up in here with a pistol to my head. You talking about call the social worker? I mean, I remember when I first heard this thing of defund the police. I'd never heard of it before. Obviously it was being incubated in elite universities in sociological grad seminars. And you know how simple them people are. If you want to see some dummies, go to a grad seminar at an elite university. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm talking about. You've been in one. Hey, you in one now?
Yeah.
Oh. You know what I'm saying? You go to one of them things, and the dumbest people who specialize in running off at the mouth. They can talk a lot, but it's no consequence. When there's no consequence to what you say, you're liable to say anything.
That's right.
You understand? If you are accountable to somebody for what you say, you're a little more discreet, a little more bounded. There are boundaries there. But if there's no consequence, you just run off at the jibs. And especially the mouth, that's what that means. And especially if the ruling class, through its media and politicians, say, yeah, go ahead, talk all that shit, you know? Go ahead. Oh, now, if the more outlandish I sound, the better my chances are of getting on CNN. You know? The more outlandish I am, the better my chances are for getting promotion and tenure at my university. So I'm going to run off at the mouth. No consequences. Defund. Wait a minute. Did I hear what I just heard? That was in the summer. I never heard of it. I'm out of touch with them people, with the universities. Defund, yes, sir, Lord, defund the police. This is on Terry Gross. Very sophisticated show, very intellectual, you know what I'm saying? Defund, yes, well, we found that the problem is the police, and since the police is the problem, what we propose as a solution is that rather than the police, you have the social worker. And the next one, so Terry Gross only asked the obvious, well, is the social worker armed? Just in the event that talk therapy don't work. No, they're going to come with sophisticated language. Sophisticated language. And administer social psychological therapy informed by Frantz Fanon, black skin, white mask, on the spot. Right. So even black people who have a conflictual and contentious relationship with policing said, get the F out of here. Are you crazy? Do you see that cat down the street there at the crack house? He don't give a fuck about nobody talking about talk. You got to disarm this cat, man. So if I called 911 and say, excuse me, we're transferring you to the Department of Social Work, they'll handle this. So it was, I mean, but you see what I'm saying? They were given carte blanche. That's another way of saying given freedom. Say what you want. Because up the rhetoric in order to get a political effect. So we want to prove that the radicals and the lefts and the progressives are really controlling the Democratic Party. Because we out here and we marching and Black Lives Matter and we got Antifa down with us and all. Oh, that was a summer of real difficulty for me. Because, you know, like when you see a lot of BS and you know it's BS, not that I'd ever seen this before, but I'm talking too much, I'm shut up. But you've been around the block a few times. You know a BS artist when you see one. You know, even when they come in a little smiley white face and use academic, you say, this is a hustler. Trying to hustle me, dog. You know, this ain't got no relationship to the real. And that's what a hustle is. To separate you from your money, but first, got to separate you from reality. You know, separate you from a real anchorage. Okay. In the midst of Black Lives Matter, in the midst of this thing of the police have to be not reformed, not radicalized, not controlled by people government, no, but abolished. In the midst of this, and not only because of this, and no one knows all the reasons, a rise of crime in urban areas. Therefore, on the ground, take Philadelphia. Let's go, not just Philadelphia in general, let's go to Cobb's Creek. Cobb's Creek, stable working class, middle class professional, all mixed in, homeowners, you know. They have had it up to here. And have said, they said to my friend Sandra, very brilliant woman, as I told you all before, she's like a political operative, a machine politician type of person. She's not an office holder, but she's one of those that puts people in office because she gets out that vote. And she told me about the anger of ordinary people, people who are church people using the MF word. You know what I'm saying? I'm not voting. They think I'm, you know, they're just going to use me again and again and nothing in return. And then the murder rate. And then Krasner, I'll come back to. Those three things have undermined what constitutes the voting base of the Democratic Party. Inflation, persistence of COVID, and the rise of violent crime. Not just a cat, you know, breaking into your car. They don't even consider that a crime no more. Or shoplifting, that's not a crime. So none of that. We're talking about hardcore, you know, pistol in the face, drive down the, you know, just shoot up a whole block, you know, randomness without boundaries. And the murder rate in Philadelphia is at an all-time high. This is producing anxiety on a level that you cannot imagine. People are afraid. I'm going to come back to Krasner, I want to get this Democrat, but probably, and there have been many tipping points, but probably the one that kind of tipped it over the edge was this young woman, 31 years old, who her family and friends had just given her a baby shower. And she was coming home and she was unloading her gifts from the back of her car, trunk of her car. And someone came up and shot her to death. And the baby, okay? Got some media attention, but it's no, quote, big thing. But it is for us. You know, we don't have to wait for the media to tell us what time of day it is. Something different is happening qualitatively. It's not just the numbers are significant, but something is going on. This is a political, and all three of these, as you can see, are politically consequential events. If the government cannot protect its citizens, if I feel unsafe in my house, even though the police station is right around the corner, and everybody know where the gun house is, if I cannot, what good is government? And why do you get me out here to vote? Okay. Now, Biden's polling numbers are lower than any president at this stage in his career, in his presidency. Less than a year. Now, you can't, all the polls are not the same. And that's not to say that some are good and some, polling is an imprecise science and it's highly weaponized and politicized. Certain polls are always going to tell you the Democrats are winning and can't lose. They said that about Hillary Clinton, and they said Biden was going to win and Trump was going to be, and it, you know, wasn't quite like that. Certain polls, like the Rasmussen poll and the Trafalgar poll, have a way of tapping into a broader sentiment than some of these other polls do. The ones that were more accurate about the last two presidential elections show Biden's polling numbers to be lower. In other words, Biden, and I think the Rasmussen poll, if I read just the other day, is 40% in favor and 57% against. In other words, he's 17 points underwater. He can't make that up, ever, ever. The more favorable polls to the Democratic Party at best show something like 43-43. Okay, that's 86, so 14% undecided. You know what I'm saying? You don't know what way they might go. But I'm saying, if you take an average of all the polls, Biden, as they say, is underwater. But then there's the other problem. And this is, how could you say, the human problem of politics, of, quote, democracy. I put quotes. Because what we're talking about are contending forces within the framework of a certain state system. In other words, we can argue, fuss, and fight all night and day long. But the bottom line is the forces that control the state make it possible for us to debate. In other words, we are not challenging the state power, the ruling elite. We're just challenging each other, like me and Emily, we fuss and fight. But we accept that the state, the sovereign as they call it, makes it possible that we can fuss and fight. And because we can fuss and fight, we call that democracy, right, without any consideration of who is controlling the state, which is, we'll get back to that in a minute. So the progressives thought that Biden's election was because of them. That is the Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, AOC, the the swamp,
squad.
The squad.
The swamp is bigger than them.
Yeah, the swamp is bigger than that. Yeah. So they thought, we did this. So Congresswoman Jayapal from out the great state of Washington on the West Coast, and she's the head of the Progressive Caucus, and they got 90 members, and they're going to flex their muscles, and they're going to say, we're not going to vote for Joe Biden's $3.5 trillion, to fight climate change, to give everybody a free shot at a community college, and everything is everything. If I get this $3.5 trillion, and I'll be the greatest progressive president since Franklin D. Roosevelt. So they said, now we're going to play brinksmanship with the centrists. Now they know ain't no Republicans going to vote for that 3.5. But they did get a bipartisan vote in the Senate on the $1.5 trillion for infrastructure, that is bridges, roads, that kind of thing, train tracks. Okay. I think they got 10 Republicans in the Senate. But in the House of Representatives, the progressive Democrats said, well, we ain't going to vote on that, the hard infrastructure, until we get a vote on the social infrastructure. You dig what I'm saying? So they were saying, we come to the table, we progressives are coming to the table with a constituency. And we're coming with a hardcore voice, and we back down in the past, but we ain't backing down no more. You understand? Well, you get the picture. We're going toe-to-toe with the centrists, with the ruling class. Okay. So until the Virginia election. And what was that cat's name? Youngkin. I call him Youngin. But Youngin. Ain't nobody never heard of it. And he wins in a purple state, or a blue state that is a Democratic state. He wins over a ruling class Democrat. And then everybody said, oh shit. And this is when all sides in the Democratic Party made a kind of truce. And they said, look at here. We can't get 3.5 trillion. What you think of 2? And the 2 got down to 1.8 trillion. Last I looked, it was down to 1.75 and falling fast. And they keep putting Schumer, and he about 2 steps behind Biden in terms of the mental thing. He shuffled. He said, we're going to have a vote on this by Christmas. Well, Christmas next week. I don't think we make Christmas. So you get a faction party. But then you get the same, not the same, but a fractured split within the White House itself. Biden can't run nothing. You know, he has to take his medication, he has to sleep. So they bring him out when they can, put him back in. You know, even during, and I'm not making fun of a cat who was frail, but you know, but you have to compare the guy. Well, he was like a thug in a beautiful suit and a kleptocrat. Everybody in his family get paid. Son Biden on the pipe, but he still get paid. He is on the pipe. His brother is getting paid. His sister, you understand? Everybody getting paid. You know, when they go to a foreign country, they say, I'm coming here on behalf of the Vice President of the United States. I said, well, how we know that? Can't break out his license. So you see, my name is Biden. And he's getting paid. You understand? But he can't. He's incapable now. So who will control the White House? So everybody asks, where's Kamala? Ain't nobody seen Kamala. Let me tell you what that happened. 2 factions, Hillary and Obama. And the Hillary people, which are also Joe Biden, they never forgave. See, Kamala did Biden dirty in the debates. You remember that?
Yeah.
When she said, I was the person trying to ride on that bus to go to school. But you wasn't right. You was up in Canada. You went to high school. Ain't nobody checked on the bus. No, she went to school in Canada. You know, she tried to play the race card. I'm a black civil rights. You know, but let me tell you, just so y'all can't get all of this because it's just too much at one time. You ever see the painting of the federal agents with the little girl? They're taking her into the schoolhouse in Little Rock, Arkansas, or somewhere. I don't know. But that's an iconic painting, right? Kamala trying to act like she's that out, and you blocked the door so I couldn't get in. So she did that, and the man, he brain dead and confused anyway, so he couldn't answer. He couldn't say, well, wait a minute, baby, you was up in Canada. But they never forgave her.
She also went after him on the Me Too, remember? When he had accusations against women staffers accused him. She attacked him in the debate on that.
She attacked him on that, on Me Too. So she got him on Me Too and on racial discrimination. You was against busing when I was trying to get on the bus so I could get an equal education. Equal education. Both of your parents are professors. You wasn't sure you had an equal education. But anyway, she played and then still couldn't go beyond 1% in the polls. But okay, so Obama and them put a lot of pressure on Biden. It's that period, after he got the nomination, they say he's weak, you know, we don't know if we can beat Trump, because Trump is a campaign, he'll go out here and rile up his people. We don't know if we can beat him. So we have to make a compromise with the Obama thing to bring these two, Clinton and Obama forces together, the two major political movements in the Democratic Party. So they asked Obama and them, well, what y'all want? We want a black woman as a vice president.
Oh, okay.
See, this will be a historic thing. This will show how progressive the Democrats are. So they couldn't find her, but one woman they wanted, come to find out, she's a congresswoman from Southern California, that she was down with the Cuban Revolution back in her day. So, although she denounced it since, you know, then they had somebody. So they ended up with Kamala. Kamala is a senator from the largest state in the union, which was a mistake tactically, because you didn't need California, so you didn't need her. You know, it would have been better to get a black woman from, let us say, Georgia. You understand? Or Pennsylvania even, you know, one of them swing states. But anyway, they figure that, well, she'd get out the black women's vote, and you heard this narrative that black women, we stand up for the Democratic Party even when black men they don't want, that don't say nothing all that much about, I mean, you've been hoodwinked. You drank the Kool-Aid for, you know, but that's just black women are the base of the, you know, but it's not, but look, believe me, it's just to try, it's a kind of seduction of people. You know, oh, you so, oh, you so down with us now on election day, but after election day, don't hear nothing, but you love black women up until, you know, all that over. So anyway, they got her, and they got her now. But then, the struggle within the White House is so intense that they shut her down. Now the problem is that if they come with the 25th Amendment and say, look, Biden is incapable of continuing as the President of the United States, which they could say, you know, of course he is, he can't do it. And they say, well, how you gonna get him out of there? We said, well, we can get Nancy Pelosi and a couple other people to come and say we're gonna impose the 25th Amendment on you. You gotta get out of here, dog. And they said, well, suppose he don't want to leave. So bring the cops in there and arrest his ass. Take him on out, you know. But they said, well, if we get him out, and all we got is Kamala. And don't nobody like her, and we in worse trouble with the masses than with Biden. Last point. Just bring it all back home. There's an essay, I think maybe Joe talked about it, that was in the New York Times. I could text it to people last week, I think, something like that, by a guy that writes regularly. And the thing that's, Edsel, I think his name is, but the thing important about his commentary on the New York Times op-ed page is that he's always citing a lot of research, academic, and then also journalistic articles and such. And what he shows in this article, what they're saying across the board, quote, democracy is in crisis. It might not survive. That the nation is so divided that that democracy as we know it, and the peaceful transition of power might not survive. They're right. There is a democratic crisis, but it is not the crisis that they're saying. The crisis is an almost irreversible split between the broad masses of people and the ruling class. And what they are really saying very simple question. In bourgeois political science, they refer to it as a crisis of legitimacy. The people do not see their rulers as legitimate. They do not see the institutions of the ruling class as legitimate. Expressly, I don't believe you. The election was stolen. COVID is a trick. I mean, whatever. They call them conspiracy theories, some of them are. It is a crisis of legitimacy. We have never seen this since the formation of what they call Madisonian democracy. Not even at the time of the Civil War. This is the first time in the history of this country that we face what they call, quote, a democratic crisis. The ruling elites are in a state of dark fear. I listen to all of the shows and read everything I can all day long, sadly. If it were not for the free school, I'd be walking around. Oh shit! I'd be up there in Kensington trying to get some fentanyl. I'd be all messed up. I'm only joking. That is a joke. I mean, I'm acting out a Richard Pryor skit, but no. These are dark days for the ruling class. Very dark days. It's not just the Trump people. As I've tried to show, in Philadelphia, if you take the three things, inflation, COVID, and violent crime, black people are so close to, en masse, abandoning the Democratic Party. They are angry. In some ways, the anger I see, and what my friend Sandra wrote about in her experience, that anger might be deeper than the anger that the Trump people feel towards the Republican Party elite or the elites in general. Black people, it's like this thing. It's like love. If you love somebody with all your heart and all your soul, you give everything, and you did this for a number of years, and then all of a sudden they come to you and say, look, for the last 5 years I've had an outside relationship. Yeah, I mean, see, that's that's a justifiable homicide case right there. If you know what I'm saying. A lot of people have gotten off on that.
Yeah, crime with passion.
Yeah, crime with passion. Yeah, well, I done worked for you. I done paid for you to go to graduate school. I done had children and raised them and stayed at home while you partied and now you gonna come to me after you get your PhD and tell me you've been going with one of your graduate student friends? Hey, you got to die now. But I'm saying I use that.
You don't get off. You don't get off. You get a lesser sentence.
Yeah, you get. All right, so you do 3 years. Yeah, unless
in the U.S.
In the U.S. My point is, the sense of betrayal is just that.
Oh yeah.
We put you first, and you put us last all the time. The resentment is deep. Politicians, black politicians, can't go into black neighborhoods. Oh, we're going to hold a community meeting. Black people come in and say, oh, no, you're not. You ain't going to hold nothing up in here. Get the fuck out of here. You understand? That is how deep it is. It is a different kind of anger, a different sense of betrayal. And it's very deep. I say all that. We do fit. Now, the question is, what comes next? One, there are elections, but elections do not tell the whole story. You know, the Democrats are going to get wiped out. They'll probably lose in 2024 as it looks right now. You're probably looking at a second Trump term if he wants it. You know, there is nobody to oppose him. The Democrats have nobody. They're already on CNN talking about, we got 11 people who could replace Biden. 11 people, then they put them up there, Kamala Harris, the governor of Illinois who was overweight and might not make it, he might have a stroke, you know. I mean, and the other 9 you ain't never heard of. Ain't nobody never heard of them. Oh yeah, Buttigieg. Buttigieg. Chill. Okay. I'm sorry, I have to introduce certain concepts I can't introduce to children. But no, Buttigieg, AOC, they try to bring it, but they can't. They have no base, and the Democratic Party is not trusted by the people. This was the last time for them. They shot their best load, and now they have nothing. What will the ruling class do? What can they do? No one can predict at this point, but we are facing political crisis the nation has ever faced, for all the reasons that we get. I'll stop on this. No, we can go to Larry Krasner in a minute, but I just wanted to set that up. I know that Jerry and Joe got some things to bring out too. Who want to go? Joe, go first, because you're talking about that data.
Oh yeah.
Hey, look, if I talk too long, y'all forgive me. I had to throw some jokes in there. Because we all be on drugs and we don't laugh.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about this polling data which came out similar to what Doc was saying. So there was a poll done. Actually, the actual surveying and all that was done in February, but the poll was compiled and whatever analysis was done in October of Americans' attitudes. Actually, it was done in a number of Western countries or advanced industrial countries,
By which they mean white.
Yeah, but it also included like South Korea, I think, and maybe Japan also. But
Okay, you get the
but anyway, I won't comment on that. I'll focus on the U.S.
I'm sorry, no, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Be yourself, Doc. Go ahead.
The data on the U.S. actually was the most stark in comparison to all the other nations, which were, although they were all bad in terms of their citizens' attitudes towards their political systems. Pretty much all the Western countries had over 50% of people who were dissatisfied with the way their system was working. And then there was a specific question about whether you feel that your political system needs to have major changes or needs to be completely reformed. And so the people who made up those two categories included over 85% of the Americans surveyed. So in other words, 85% of Americans, when asked about their democracy and their political system, I should say that it needs to be completely reformed or needs major changes. And then when they asked about the economic system,
Can I ask you a question? What is the breakdown between reform and major change?
that's a good question. I think it was fairly even, I think, but it also is not defined exactly the difference between. That's also the thing between major reforms or complete change. The other thing is this was taken back in February, but even back then in the economic system, they said that 66% of people also said the same thing, that the economic system needs major reform or needs major change or completely be reformed. And I think if they were to do it now, it would probably be, I don't know, maybe 80% similar. And then similar number, 76% said the same thing about the healthcare system as well. And I think that would also be higher given the situation with COVID. And I think in the countries that they surveyed generally, which include the, we were saying, all the advanced industrial nations,
it was about 56% that had held this view. It included, France, Germany, but it was over 2/3 in Italy, Spain, the U.S., South Korea, France, Belgium, and Japan. So all of that holds. I mean, it basically shows that this crisis of legitimacy, crisis of the political system, which is essentially a crisis of democracy, again, tying into this democracy summit, maybe Jeremiah will talk a little bit about. But it shows how the U.S. and its major allies, the whole Western world, and these two countries in Asia, which are closely tied to the Western system, all of them, there's mass dissatisfaction. And I mean, this is all stuff we've been talking about in free school. That's when you talk about Trump, you talk about these other populists which are emerging in Europe. It's basically this a similar type of thing. And yeah, this also went across party lines. This is both Republican-leaning people and Democratic-leaning people. Interesting, there's another statistic in here which said that 58% of the U.S. public was not confident that the system could change. The system is capable of change, in other words. So yeah, there's and then you talked about the Biden's polls. I was looking a little bit into that also. There was a poll done by there was an aggregate of different polls actually done by this website called 538.com, and it showed that if you aggregate all the polls, 50.8% disapprove of Biden right now, and only 43% approve. So that would include the ones that are favorable to the Democrats and unfavorable. Interestingly, Congress disapproval in the same aggregate poll is 77%. Disapprove of the job Congress is doing. Another very interesting number was by a CNN poll, which showed that 2/3 of Americans doubt that they can trust Biden.
2/3?
Yeah, 2/3. Yeah, it's a poll commissioned by CNN. Yeah, I won't say too much about the democracy summit. I'll let Jeremiah talk about that. But another poll also showed that less than half of Americans trust major corporations, including the news, media, but also these big private corporations, the big tech companies. Those also have a lot of distrust. And another poll which we talked about in the last spring, when the first edition of this democracy summit had happened in, I think it was held in Denmark, I believe. It was in Europe, the first summit. But at that time, that Alliance of Democracies Foundation, which is basically, again, an organization founded by these different governments and kind of closely connected to NATO, they did a survey of 50,000 respondents in 53 countries to find out what people view as the greatest threat to democracy as part of their attempt to build this coalition of democracies against, so-called authoritarian regimes. But interestingly, that poll showed of all the countries, when they asked people which country do you think is the biggest threat to democracy, they had expected that people were going to say Russia or China, but it ended up that 44% of respondents, which is the largest for any country, said that the United States is the greatest threat to democracy in the world. And then when they asked what single biggest factor is the greatest threat, 64% said it's actually economic inequality, which shows that people all over the world are very concerned about these economic issues. And so I think a lot of that, I mean, to the extent that we need hard data, that backs up a lot of what we've been talking about, the mass distrust in the most acute in the United States among the American masses. Most acute. But then generally in the West as well. It's a crisis of the West. We could say, Du Bois would say this is a crisis of the Western civilization. That in the West and in the Asian nations which are most trying to copy the West, there's mass dissatisfaction with the political system, the economic system, the way of life, and that's a huge obstacle in building this so-called, alliance or coalition of democracies, of the Western understanding of democracy. And also, I mean, there's a lot in what you said that I'm thinking about, but I mean, even this thing of the idea that, we have, these progressives, let's say in Congress, like that's supposed to be an argument for, we have a democratic system. Like, you don't love everything about Biden, but you have these progressives. But then, as you're describing, I mean, the progressives are so spineless, not really willing to challenge the administration.
I wish I had used that
language. Yeah. No, but I think that crisis is even worse than before, because I think in living memory before, you used to have some people in Congress that would actually, grill the administration, actually put up a fight, actually, because, people elect you to that position where you have this pulpit, you have some power, especially in the House of Representatives. I mean, you're supposed to be a representative. And so you always had a few voices historically that were challenging, especially challenging the war consensus, I was listening to an interview with Cynthia McKinney, who was a former representative from Georgia, who was kind of pushed out of mainstream politics because of her positions on things. But she was describing a lot of what you were saying. She was like, yeah, we used to have in the black community, we used to have people used to vote because they used to feel like, okay, I can elect a representative that would speak for me, that would use whatever power they have. And, that would, for example, with Cynthia McKinney, she was holding the Bush administration accountable, grilling the defense secretary, asking questions, what's happening with the Iraq war, what's happening with weapons of mass destruction. Other people would do this, challenge the kinds of racist policies that existed. But she talked about how with Obama, that the whole thing was a wave of trying to destroy any semblance of that independent black or working class politics, and replace it with this new wave of basically, people who would just be faces for the same agenda. And I mean, she was very critical of the squatters, which the squad are totally spineless people who are just yeah. And so yeah, I mean, it's a veneer of trying to show an opposition, which is not really an opposition. Just there, it's an opposition that's just there to, like you were saying, prevent people from leaving. I mean, like the AOCs and, AOC was supposedly elected as this, great outsider. She beat some veteran politician in New York, but and she was like, okay, I'm gonna challenge Nancy Pelosi, but now she's like, oh, Nancy Pelosi's mama bear, working together. There's another interview I saw with, it was actually a conversation between AOC and Noam Chomsky.
Oh yeah.
Did you see that?
I missed that.
Yeah. I mean, not much you learn from it, but it just shows you the fact that they're both, Chomsky, who's supposed to be the greatest, dissident, progressive intellectual, and AOC is supposed to be the greatest dissident, progressive politician. They're both on the same page as far as it goes. They're both like, okay, we need to work for the Green New Deal. We need to work to fight the far-right threat against the Biden administration. Sadly, that's also the narrative being pushed by the remnants of the Communist Party, USA. They're like, the biggest priority is defending the Biden administration from the far-right threat. So anyway, this is all showing us, and then the only actual dissident voices, the only actual voices of opposition, basically the Trump coalition, that's being suppressed, not just smeared and suppressed, but they're going after them legally with these cases. They're trying to disqualify them from participating in elections. Hillary Clinton is already making the round saying, oh, Trump is trying to steal 2024. Yeah, I think she might be trying to make a comeback too.
Oh, no.
And as we were discussing with the left, some of them will criticize the Russiagate narrative, but they won't talk about what is the Russiagate targeted. I mean, it's not just about Trump the man. It's about stopping this mass opposition to war, to imperial expansion, to aggression. It's about trying to repress the mass move for peaceful coexistence and a restructuring of the economy. I think we're probably going to see things worse than Russiagate. I mean, there's Russiagate, then there's January 6th gate. I don't know what gate is coming next.
And then there's Julian Assange.
There's Julian Assange, definitely, yeah, 100%, yeah. And within the Trump coalition, there are people who are actually very supportive of Julian Assange, and who are like on some of these right-wing websites. They're interviewing Julian Assange's family and talking about like why we need to support Julian Assange in his battle against, in their words, the globalist empire, which I think is all good. I mean, it shows how there's an emergence of this critical thinking against this ruling elite consensus, and so I think that holds some possibility for democracy, more so than the ruling elite attempting to speak in the name of democracy.
ahead, Jerry.
No, just to follow up on Jahan, last week we talked briefly about the Democracy Summit that Biden had pulled together. And I think this was like the official summit for democracy, like the one that happened in early this month was like the first time they were like doing this like specific kind of convention. I think it may have been slightly different from the democracy.
Yeah, I think the earlier one was more like civil society.
Yeah.
And, you know.
Because they were, like a lot of news outlets were pointing out that even during the Cold War, US didn't stage this kind of summit, quote unquote, summit of democratic countries. So it shows the stakes, I think, of, how they're trying to, basically, like, everyone, I think, in the media was reporting, like, clearly this is aimed at Russia and China, and also there's a lot of fuss about who was invited, who was not invited, because that's the interesting thing is like.
Hey, Jerry, just
yeah.
if I may, could you just tell everybody what the summit was, just so
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
people might not know.
Right, so this was like one of Biden's big ideas was to host a summit of democratic countries because, democracy is threatened, basically. And
And it actually goes back to 2018. This alliance of this foundation for democracies, Biden helped start it back in 2018 when Trump was still president and was on the board because it basically was a reaction to the Trump, administration.
Yeah. And so they invited like over 100 different countries, but I think a decent number of them declined. So only like about 89 showed up. Like Pakistan didn't show
Yeah,
up.
South Africa.
Yeah, they're like, thank you, but rather not. And yeah, I think I mentioned at least last week that like the official State Department live feed of the summit was only getting like 70 views as it was streaming live. And I think I checked back on those official videos and it was like maybe a couple thousand views, like 6,000 or 7,000. And then like videos of like from news outlets like Reuters and stuff was maybe a little higher, like 15 to 20,000. But for reference, videos that were criticizing the Democracy Summit received 10 to 20 times more views, like 200,000 views, There's like this YouTube channel called like The Hill, which is like a news outlet, but they have like this show called Rising, and this video that they were doing criticizing and basically pointing out how hypocritical it was receiving like 10 to 20 times more than the actual summit itself. And yeah, I think basically the gist that I got was like either Americans didn't know it was happening or like they saw it was happening and didn't care. And also what's interesting is that I don't know if there was like coordination, but recently YouTube removed the ability to see dislikes on a video, supposedly to protect like small independent creators. But it's more so because every video that the Biden administration puts out is always universally disliked by like way more than the number of likes, and so I think that was a strategic thing that YouTube has been doing, basically to protect Biden. Yeah, to protect the Biden administration. And yeah, I think like because the purpose basically of this was to rally support for the U.S.'s Cold War agenda against Russia and China, I think both domestically but also internationally, like they're not really able to muster up the support from it. Because I think I was actually curious of like what your perspective was, because at least I think during the first Cold War, a good number of the American people were ideologically in support of it, and they believed in the American project and the sort of slogan of democracy that was being pushed. But today it's like the level of support amongst the American people is way lower than it was during the first Cold War, which was which was an important factor in basically what led to the outcome of that. And yeah, I think there's an interesting New York Times op-ed which was basically saying like, everyone's criticizing Biden for holding this democracy summit because, we have all of these problems and how can the US host this, and also why are they picking and choosing certain countries to invite and not invite. But then this New York Times op-ed was basically saying like, actually, like we should be more optimistic. Like we still have a lot to defend, and the Biden administration has a lot to be proud of, whatever. And they defined democracy as, quote, a regime in which incumbents lose elections and leave office. Like literally the most narrow view of what a democracy is. And obviously it's all aimed at like the January 6th thing of basically being like, if January 6th had succeeded, then our democracy would have failed. And because I think the Western media is very conscious now that especially China is pushing its own, like asserting its own understanding of what democracy is and what Chinese whole process democracy, as they call it, as a model or as an actual functioning democracy. And the way that Western media tries to spin it is that basically Russia and China are saying that democracy means whether you can deliver growth and stability for your people. But then the New York Times is saying, actually no, like democracy means when you can have like a transfer of elections or something.
This is very important.
And
wow. Why don't you say a little bit more about that's very, very important.
Yeah, well,
what the definition of democracy is.
Like it has nothing to do with the rule of the people,
That's right.
the will of the people. It has nothing to do with war or poverty. You know, like Du Bois, I think that was very eye-opening for a lot of us, was reading how Du Bois was defining democracy and what is the greatest threat to democracy, and him saying that it's imperialism and poverty as the greatest threat, and not even fascism, you know? And yeah, like the fact that they're doubling down on like, actually democracy is when people lose elections, you know, it's like, they're really like it shows a level of panic, but also like that they're conscious that like they don't, as the Chinese government is saying, like the U.S. doesn't hold a monopoly on defining what democracy is, basically. And yeah, like there's that guy Timothy Snyder, who is the Yale professor, who is basically advising like the council of business leaders who had to swoop in during January 6th and basically quote unquote defend democracy. I think he was interviewed by the Washington Post, basically to defend the like underlying purpose of the Democracy Summit and saying, yeah, like it's important to have the summit because it's important to name democracy as an aspiration. And we spend too long imagining that democracy is a normal state of affairs, and that democracy is something everybody wants. But clearly, you know, the Trump movement and also Russia and China show that maybe not everybody wants democracy. And he said, so this is how this Yale professor presents it. He says, the Russians present democracy as a joke, the Chinese present it as a mess. Both U.S. adversaries are effective in undermining a system of government that too often is taken for granted. And he says, my basic background point is that democracy is always a struggle, and it's never the status quo. The idea that people should rule is a radical idea, and one you have to make sacrifices for, or it will erode. And so, yeah.
And he's directing somebody's dissertation.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, forgive me.
No. I mean, that was the main subject.
Well, I mean, you know, it's interesting because the U.S. ruling elite is basically defining democracy as basically democracy is when you don't have the exercise of popular power, right? So they're like, okay, if you have a government which is popular, which is, I mean, popular in the sense of serving the people, you know, representative of the people and delivering to the people, you have to have this bourgeois legal method of limiting that. You know, you have to leave office after a certain amount of time. You have to be impeached, whether you're the Trump movement or you're Trump as a popular leader, or you're the Chinese government as people's democracy, or you're Putin, or whoever you are. You have to basically follow these rules. I mean, that's the other thing with procedural democracy, like we're talking about. Procedural democracy. But who defines the procedure? Who is the procedure working for? The procedure, okay, it originates in, you know, the bourgeois revolutions of Europe or the United States, and in that sense it was a reaction and opposition to the feudal control of society. But, you know, in 2021, the world is different. There's the masses of people. There's the workers, there's the peasants, there's the poor, there's the, as we said, the angry and the dispossessed. And these procedures are being used by the elite to try to contain this
popular expression of what could be a higher stage of democracy.
That's right.
And here it's become very moribund. I mean, it's like, you know, the U.S. is becoming the sick man of the West. You know, like they used to call the Ottoman Empire the sick man of Asia, the sick man of, you know, of the West, basically. That's, I mean, sad to say, but best symbolized by the
Well, we could
president.
also call us the drug addict of the
Yeah,
West.
anything.
Everybody's
drug
on
addict.
drug. Yeah, but good. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And then, I mean, this COVID mess also.
Yeah, we're sick too.
This COVID mess and the whole people's anger at Fauci and the pharmaceutical companies and the suppression of any discussion on that also by big tech. So anyways, I also want to say, as Jeremiah was saying, like in some ways I think it's two big mistakes the Biden administration is doing is I think diplomatically they made a big mistake and are making a big mistake in going after Ukraine and Taiwan, pushing those tensions at the same time. It's a huge mistake because you're putting your two adversaries, giving them a reason to work together even more. But the other big mistake with the Democracy Summit is you're bringing this into this thing of democracy, this as an issue, into debate on the global stage.
And you're gonna lose.
Yeah, you're not prepared at all. You're not intellectually prepared, and your own democracy is such a mess.
Yeah, right.
And I mean, a lot of the analyses I've seen, they've talked about how the summit is it's struggling to work because U.S. democracy is in such a mess. And even Biden's speech basically was hinting a lot at the domestic situation.
Yeah.
And so you're not prepared. And I think that's also why it's a losing fight ideologically, for the U.S. in the minds of the people of the world. Like they are really seeing like, oh, U.S. democracy is being exposed. I mean, it's a process, a slow process, but you're seeing that happen. The image is unraveling at the same time that the empire is physically unraveling. I mean, in addition to inflation, we've seen so much the defeat in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
That was a shock. I mean, and as much as inflation, that's a huge thing for the people of the world to see the U.S. leaving and the failure of that effort. And I think it's a matter of time before we see something similar in Iraq and other places, other areas. The U.S. troops are. This whole situation in Ethiopia, which has not been talked about that much, but it's again a situation in which the Biden administration's policies are failing at regime change, and you're seeing the multipolar world. So anyway, it's the dysfunctional U.S. state. It's just being exposed. It seems like it's even going to get worse.
We have some Facebook comments.
Oh, we have some time.
Well, there's lots of people tuning in today, so I'll just list a few of them. Veronica, Ankram's watching, Stephen Palmieri, Dedra, Amit Kumar says good morning, Professor. Not sure if you know Amit Kumar. Grady says hello. Nuri from Seoul is watching. Yvonne says hello. But in response to what you asked earlier, Doc, when you said, what can the ruling class do today? Or what can they do now? Stephen Palmieri says they can start a war. Nabila says, just like you started out saying how education is major in forming the character of the young, the colleges don't want you to help form the character of the post-high schoolers. They don't want the students to love you for what you bring and how you expand their worldviews, which is very true. And then Daniel Lee Eisenberg Jacob says, all of Doc's comments, and this goes back to democracy, it goes back to democracy. What you're saying, and also what Jahan and Jeremiah added in. Daniel says, all of Doc's comments about the left at the beginning of his remarks are awesome. I am cheering him from computer. I think one of the biggest obstacles in the present is the assumption shared across the political spectrum that the Democrats are to the left of the Republicans. Even when the left says they hate the Democrats or call them spineless or imperialist, or that they betray them, the problem is that they are still more comfortable with the Democrats. This is an ideological attachment. The common approach going back to the 30s for the American left is that a reconstituted left would come out of a split of the Democratic Party. I have had people tell me it would look like how the Republicans split the Whigs. The left re-watered the Democrats with the New Deal, re-watered them again with the McGovern-Fraser Commission, and now they have done the same with quote-unquote democratic socialism. It is some straight-up BS. It is possible to have two right wings. That the Republicans are right-wing doesn't make the Democrats to the left of them. The left should not define itself against the right, but this is what the left did against Trump. When he said yes, they said no. They followed his lead under the name of resistance. That is not political leadership. I think the emergence of a true left would not be a split either from the Republicans or the Democrats, but would cut across the political spectrum, reconstruct how we understand left and right. It would draw from Democrats, Republicans, non-political. I think what should define the left is raising the horizon of emancipation. This is ideological and practical, not sensibility, demographic, or legislation. The right is the liquidation of that possibility. And then Veronica says, I will never vote for the Democratic Party again, and I prefer to stay home and not vote at all. And then Michelle says, who just joined in, says, what kind of school teaches anti-democracy, quote unquote popular power, when the popular vote, which does represent the people, is ignored, even tried to be violently overthrown? That is completely contrary to this discussion for autocracy that this little group seems to be
I
having.
don't quite understand. Could you say that? What kind of, read that again?
I think she's talking about free school. What kind of school teaches anti-democracy? I think I think it's a misunderstanding of what we're talking about. Quote unquote popular power. When the popular vote, which does represent the people, is ignored, even tried to be violently overthrown. I think she's talking about January 6th.
Okay.
That is completely contrary to this discussion for autocracy. Well, so Michelle thinks that the free school is promoting autocracy.
Okay.
What is the quote unquote ruling class? Michelle asks.
Okay. We can get back to that.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I think that was it. Oh. Grady adds in, what is a good and a better ideological response to America's divisions? What is good and a better ideological answer to America's divisions? Is the objective of the good and better responses unity? Is the objective of the good and the whole? Is the objective of the good and the better responses wholeness? Is quote unquote united and quote unquote whole a distinction without a difference? That is to say, 6 of one, a half dozen of the other. I'll try to get this right. If you say yes to my last question, do this. Go to your nearest bakery and ask for a united loaf of bread. Go to another bakery and ask for a whole loaf of bread. What's the distinction between the two scenarios? Is the distinction between the two scenarios one with an actual difference? If it is, then the distinction between united and whole is also one with a difference. What do all these questions have to do with the divisions in America and the collapse of the ruling class? Stay tuned to stay in Saturday Free School. Praying hands. Well, I think all these comments are great because I think the topic of conversation that we're having with the free school today and that all these past weeks have been building up to is the quintessential question of our times and the crisis we're facing. It's one of democracy. It's even the definition of democracy. But it also explains, like we were saying, it explains the violence that we see in a city like Philadelphia. That's kind of common across most urban cities ruled by Democrats. And that all, I mean, it's pretty amazing how actually the landscape of Philadelphia and the responses you're seeing to the gun violence, to Mayor Kenny, to Krasner, how actually has everything to do with the breakdown of the Democratic Party, the complete breakdown of governance, the complete breakdown of any sort of semblance of a social contract that the people feel they have with the state. And I feel like all these comments that people are leaving on the live stream show how much the question of democracy globally, domestically, even in a city like Philadelphia has to do with the plight of the people today.
I think just one of the comments was from Michelle, who was saying that the free school is siding with the anti-democratic forces in the country. Well, that would be, and I'm glad she raised that because that puts us in debate with the forces that we are opposed to, because her position is the position of the ruling elite, that they represent democracy. And what we are saying is they don't represent democracy, that they are, well, you know, we've said it before, that in many ways the people of the United States see their governance and their rule as illegitimate. I think when you listen to the data that Jahan pointed out, I would say to Michelle, without going into a lot of things, how would she address this data, that the American people say their own democracy, the democracy that supposedly defines our country and makes it possible for us to rule or govern, the people to rule or govern. Well, the people are saying that's not the case. Over 2/3 of them saying it has to be changed. So I would say to Michelle, your argument with us is not really an argument with us, it's an argument with the majority of people, and we, the free schools, seem to be closer to the majority of people than the ruling elite do.
My mom's question.
Oh, your mom, oh, tell us it, hey. Yeah. So, I don't know what else, unless somebody, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, this conversation kind of makes you think back to what you were saying earlier in the day about like the long game. What is the long view in all of this? What is the end goal of the idea of democracy? Is it that we're in the streets, we're afraid to go outside because our neighbors are shooting each other? Can we expect to go around the world and plan on bombing as many people as humanly possible? I mean, this seems completely contrary to the idea of it inherently. You know, it seems like the idea is so much more wrapped up in this culture of possession over other people. I don't know, I was thinking about how like Nancy Pelosi was making the argument of why it's okay for her to be trading in stocks and be, you know, in a legal position to determine where stocks are going to go. And she says it's a free market, you know, we're allowed to participate in a free market. I mean, I can't participate in that free market, I don't have that position. But and just thinking about these other countries that have been brought up, you know, Japan and South Korea, I mean, the United States wrote the Japanese Constitution, right? So how is that a democracy? How do we even begin to not even, how is that not widely known? You know, that's, it's a democracy if the United States decides it is. That's what that term means. It seems very antithetical to the idea of a peaceful transition of power. That's one of the things they like to say. Well, you know, we think about the history of this country. You know, this government had planned on dropping 200 atomic bombs on 66 cities in Asia. You know, to subvert them from ever having the ability to defend themselves, right? So that, I mean, what is the end goal of these ideas, really? Are we talking about peace? And if we're not, what is it we're really talking about then? That's definitely lost in the conversation when we're, you know, trying to discuss these very, very minor issues in governance. You know, the bigger picture we need to hold on to.
Yeah, but isn't that the fundamental question? Can the ruling class rule? Are they legitimate governors of the country? And this is what Emily just raised. I mean, it is not, democracy is just the cover for something more nefarious. They're not defending them. They claim that they are defending democracy, but really what they're defending is their rule. And what the people are saying, that's what these data that Johan reads out tells us. The people are saying, you are not legitimate governors, rulers of the country. There is no social contract between you who are rich and powerful and cynical and degenerate, decadent, and we the people who are suffering. That's why I talked about those three things: inflation, COVID, and violence, and how these things affect the ordinary person in a way that they don't affect Krasner, in a way that they don't affect Pelosi, or any of the rest of these people.
Any solutions they talk about, defunding the police, you could only have that idea if you lived in a bubble. That's really where that idea pops from.
Right. Like AOC talk about defunding the police,
Right,
or when
right.
people storming the Capitol, you got the
Right,
Capitol.
right,
right.
Not my police.
Not police.
Don't defund the Capitol
back,
Police.
yeah.
We stand with the Capitol Police. We defund the rest of the police.
Having the pretense of this notion of freedom of speech, while we're taking an Australian and putting them to death, essentially, for the right we say is universal. And I was watching an interview with the president, I think, of Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan. And I don't really know much about him, but he was being very much interrogated by a BBC journalist saying, I hear you don't have freedom of speech in your country. And he's like, well, what about Julian Assange?
And he tries to walk away from
Yeah,
it, and then
yeah.
he's like, no, I'm asking you about you.
So it's getting harder and harder to keep this this veneer from being exposed.
Because I think even with January 6th, I think, like, obviously you can view it as people not accepting a legitimate election. Like, that is how, I think that's like the mainstream view that's being pushed as what January 6th was the threat of. But, I mean, you already pointed this out, but even if you take that at its face value, then what about Russiagate? I think Russiagate has to be viewed first and foremost as the attempt to overturn a legitimate
There
election.
was no question.
And I think for the people who either showed up at January 6th or don't see this whole, basically the start of a cold or like a war on terror domestically as a good thing, I think it's not so much about the legitimacy of the election, although that's part of it, but also I think the view of the Trump movement is that they saw Biden as the restoration of a regime, basically. Like and I think basically we have to be able to see things from different perspectives.
Yes.
And also the other thing too is that I think there should be a lot more concern about the extent to which the deep state or the national security state was involved in January 6th as well. Because if people remember, right before the election, there was this supposed plot of Trumpers to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer, the Michigan governor. But it turned out that of the people who they were suspected of plotting this, the majority of them were FBI agents. Literally. The Gretchen Whitmer plot was seen as the prelude to January 6th. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's also what Jahan was putting out, people in the far right who are uncovering a lot of this. But they're attempting to basically quell that story.
Right.
Yeah.
Even with I was reading a little bit about Bannon, the case he has, a court case. I think he got held in contempt, and then they're going to court. But he's part of the reason he's going to court. And he said his lawyer is requesting all the documents that they're using in this secret hearing, which they held him in contempt for not showing up, but they don't want to release to the public about what happened, the information they have about who among the January 6th people were provocateurs working for the FBI or other elements of national security state. So, I mean, if it's all about democracy, they should reveal all this information. It shouldn't be secret. You should say, what information do you have, what happened. Instead, they're trying to keep it secret, but then leak out certain things and try to shape a media narrative so that you don't know exactly what happened, but because the media is working so closely with them, I mean, that they're able to distort things. But I agree with you that I think that they can do as much as they want right now, because as much as they do, probably when they lose the House and maybe the Senate, the Republicans will probably take revenge and call up all kinds of people. Hunter Biden might be testifying. All kinds of things soon.
if I could just say, this is all unlike anything else, I think, in the history of the country. And for your generation, I would say for my generation, no one has seen this. And it was always assumed that the American state was strong, especially after World War II. It could not implode. There would never be a domestic challenge to it. If there were, it would come from the, quote, as they say, racial minorities, meaning black people. So you could have COINTELPRO and all of that, and assassination of leaders. But, like they say, generals are always fighting the last war. So they were not prepared for a white uprising of this type. And, going forward, one cannot rule out that every kind of provocation from the deep state to turn this from really what is a class and ideological assault upon the state and try to make it a racial thing. So they will have provocateurs kill black people, or black provocateurs kill white people, when that's not the essence of this at all. It's not the essence. In fact, the Boogaloo Boys, who I find very interesting, a white organization called the Boogaloo Boys, who disavow white supremacy.
Yeah.
And the other, what's the other one?
Proud Boys.
The Proud
The
Boys.
head of it is an Afro-Cuban guy.
Who is gay.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, somebody in the top is gay, But they said, no, we're not racist, we're just white civilization. But whatever they are, it reflects something deep. And a deep split from the state. This is what is all new.
Yeah.
This is what is all new. And interesting, that's what I find about the Proud Boys. I don't think the, quote, left can claim that they represent all non-binary. That the LGBTQs on all sides, and all the LGBTQs ain't down with Biden. You got a lot of LGBTQs that are down with the other side. So, I mean, let the LGBTQs speak for the damn self. So they're trying to appropriate everybody. All the black people is down with, no, we're not. I mean, so this idea that just because you got Al Sharpton on television, that means that he speaks for all of us. He don't speak for none of us. I mean, let me shut my mouth. The guy that spoke for most black people in this period was Louis Farrakhan.
Okay.
Yeah.
He was the most popular voice of the grassroots of black people. And they did everything they could to discredit him. But he was the most popular voice. But that's all I just want to say.
Doc, I just want to echo what you were saying about the sense of betrayal from the Democratic Party.
Yes.
We've been saying. Across the board with the working class, but also like more bourgeois elements, especially young people, there's a great sense of you have not delivered on the promises that you made. With student loans, but other things as well. That they see the incapability of Biden and the Democrats to deliver on anything they promise. And I think that's a great opportunity.
How is that affecting, how do you, in your experience, what is the sentiment about the society and about struggle among young people?
That sense of betrayal from the Democratic Party. I don't have a sense of where it's going. I don't have a sense of what people are turning to in lieu of that.
Well, the student loan thing, Biden said that he's not gonna include anything about canceling student debt. I think it may be in this bill you're talking about, but it also turned out that because he was a senator from Delaware, where a lot of banks are registered,
he had previously written the bill that allowed all the student debt to happen, made it impossible to cancel it, or what do you call default on it or any of that stuff. So people should have looked into him. No, but also I think the problem is that with a lot of this demographic, like the more like college educated young people, the problem is that while a lot of people get disappointed in Biden or previously have been disappointed in Hillary Clinton or Obama, the role of people like Bernie Sanders and AOC is to kind of whip them up and be like, okay, it didn't work this time, but next time elect us in larger numbers, we'll have the numbers, progressive caucus will be bigger, we'll keep out you want the fascists to come,
Yeah, right.
and that type of
With
stuff.
Bernie, it's interesting because I think he's trying to jump on the Du Bois train. He's doing a reconstruction event.
What the hell?
With Eric Garner.
Oh yeah. Well, that's the thing. Yeah, there is a thing of they're trying to use Black Reconstruction, but Eric Foner's Black Reconstruction.
But it's not Black Reconstruction.
Yeah,
It's called
yeah,
Reconstruction.
Yeah, right.
Yes,
Yeah,
we
right.
got rid of black.
Yeah, cut out Black,
It's
just
just
Reconstruction.
Like they said, let's
Yeah.
conveniently
Yeah.
get rid of
Right,
Black
right,
and
right,
Black
right,
Reconstruction.
Well, yeah, even the imagery, they show it
That's
buildings, but there's
insane.
no black people.
Right. Who's doing the reconstructing? That's
Well, that fits Bernie Sanders well
Yeah,
because
yeah.
the only socialism that he really likes is of the white nations.
Yeah.
Norway, Sweden, Luxembourg, any place. I love that socialism.
Yeah, right.
But when you ask them about Venezuela, well, Hugo Chavez is a dead communist dictator. Come on, you fake.
Yeah. I mean, they are trying to. I mean, it's this thing of trying to use this imagery in a superficial way. Like, okay, Reconstruction. Okay, poor people's campaign. Okay, what else can you resurrect? But without any of the substance, and give it to people in the elite to kind of manipulate and these intellectuals.
Can I just ask a question? I mean, I hadn't heard about the Bernie Sanders, Eric Foner. Now, where's this going to happen?
Online.
Oh,
Somewhere.
definitely.
But actually,
They're gonna get that.
apparently, as part of the Democratic Socialist program, we're reading Black Reconstruction together now. I think it's
Black
really-
Reconstruction?
Yeah.
Part of what?
They're fucking it up.
I think so.
Locally or nationally?
I know
How you going to
Facebook
make a
chapter.
reconstruction?
Oh, really?
DSA?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
So they're 3 years behind the year of Du Bois.
Yeah.
4 years
Honestly,
behind.
I feel like who knows how they're reading it, but I feel like it kind of falls in line with like how they're probably gonna push it as like the follow up to 1619.
Probably, yeah.
Oh.
I didn't see DSA, but I saw that People's Forum in New York. Remember I was asking you about some of that stuff, but they did something past summer, like political education summer, and so then they had a section on like, I think it was race or maybe working class history, and it was like, okay, Black Reconstruction, but they just had like read chapter 1 and then read the last
That's
chapter.
it.
And then
It's
they
like
brought in people like, that's what I was asking about that guy James Early and Robin Kelly and these people to explain a little bit, okay, this is what it is, and this helps explain Trump, the white workers who elect Trump, they're like the restorationists, the redeemers, anyway, so yeah, it's yeah. I mean, it's like the people who tried to like end Reconstruction, redeem, yeah. So anyway, but that's when it's in the hands of these people, I mean, that's the role of the academics and the ruling class intellectuals, especially the so-called progressives, trying to incubate new movements. When you leave it in their hands, I mean, this is what they do with Black Reconstruction, or with poor people's movement, or with what have you, or with Baldwin for that matter.
Good God Almighty. Well, let me just say, I mean, this is, whew. I mean, you think you made one step forward, and here comes the BS. And when they come, it's like loads of it. I mean, wait a minute. So, I know you mentioned this to me, but I can't keep up with everything you mentioned, John. Yeah. See, this is what we're all. This is the complexity of the ideological struggle and why so many people prefer empty activism to grounded, purposeful action. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, anybody could jump up, oh, I'm marching for Black Lives Matter. So who told you about it? I heard about it on CNN. Okay, right. So now, but this is, excuse my joking, but anyone who disparages the struggle of ideas is pessimistic about the possibility of a future. Anybody, I don't care who he is or she is. Anyone who disparages the ideological struggle, who thinks hyperbolic language, like my friend Cornell, I'll talk about.
Well, he's in this reconstruction
He's in
thing with
there,
Eric Foner. It's Eric Foner, Bernie Sanders, Eric Foner, Kianga, Yamato Taylor, and Cornell West. Actually, it's tomorrow. If you want to check it out tomorrow night.
Let's go.
Okay, I'm so glad you, oh Lord. You know, I do try to take a day off now and then. But these people don't give you the opportunity to relax. You know, it is because of Du Bois's comprehensive ideological intervention that he was shut down. It's not because well, his political activism, but because of the power of his ideas, the shifting of a paradigm, a way of understanding the whole history and system. And so now, these revisionists and perpetrators who never mentioned Black Reconstruction, including Eric Foner, one mention of Du Bois in the preface of 3 or 4 pages. Oh yes, and I'd like to thank Du Bois for his work in the past. Now let's move it on.
I met him when I was a kid once. That's what he talks about.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And if he saw me today, he would spit on me. But Eric Foner's Reconstruction is a polemic against Black Reconstruction. It is not just a different take, it's polemic against Black Reconstruction.
Yeah.
That is why, don't go nowhere, Sophia, the conference on Winston that you all, you know, was so very, very important. And we'll come back, I just wanted to say that before you, yeah. Because there is a principled engagement with Du Bois and an unprincipled. Cornell is not principled on Du Bois, believe me. My heart, I love him. But he has never been able to find a principled engagement with Du Bois. You know, he's always going somewhere else. William James, John Dewey, you know, when it comes to pedagogy, somewhere else. And, you know, and then he'll start naming names, Ella Baker, Harriet Tubman, so and so, and Du Bois. Du Bois is in a mix, but always trivialized. Du Bois is huge, world historic. You know what I'm saying? His thinking provides a way to understand the crisis of our time. They're not going to deal with it that way. And that's what is so infuriating about this whole thing. You know, I love to debate or to talk with a principled opponent. Let us disagree. But an unprincipled, you can't do anything with an unprincipled person. You know, today I'm talking a lot about dating and all. Try to date an unprincipled person. You end up going to jail for murder or manslaughter. I mean, you cannot deal with an unprincipled person. Because an unprincipled, let me just say, being unprincipled is a form of bad faith. Bad faith is a form of lying.
Yeah.
You know, but it's a line where you can hedge and say, well, I really wasn't lying. I was just, well, that type of thing. So this is what we're dealing with. Eric Foner has nothing to say when it comes to Du Bois. Just talk about your book, what you did, but leave Du Bois out of it. But isn't this interesting? Now they have to reference Du Bois.
Right, right.
You all who did not want to mention, I'm telling you, Eric Foner, not in his book. Look in the index, and you look for the name W.E.B. Du Bois one time in a brief preface, once, so he doesn't take Black Reconstruction seriously. And of course, what is the Indian scholar's name from Columbia? Spivak. She, a few years ago, I guess she gave up on it. She was, you remember up at Cornell, she showed up there. And she was she was challenging Du Bois's notion of the general strike. That how could Du Bois claim a general strike and he never read Rosa Luxemburg? I'm saying, well, shit, she wasn't alive. But, I mean, it's always some kind of nickel and dime espionage. Oh, well, Rosa Luxemburg, and of course she was from Europe, and of course she knows, and Du Bois is from the ghetto, so how could he know what a general strike?
What happened to Rosa Luxemburg's general strike? How did that go?
Well, it never came off. Yeah, it never happened. But this is hard. This is really hurtful to me. Du Bois is not to be trivialized or kicked around. It's.
But now, I mean, this thing with Bernie Sanders. I mean, it's interesting to connect the dots with what we were saying today. I mean,
go ahead.
Go
ahead, Joe. You do it better than I.
This thing of the progressives, the fake progressives, basically are going to use it. I mean, it seems to me. We'll see when they do the session, but the whole thing is going to be about, okay, save this democracy, i.e. Biden, from the threats to democracy, i.e.
That's right.
Trump movement.
That's right.
Who are, supposedly the Confederates, neo-Confederates, and so on.
I know how to. Yeah, it's going to be, quote, abolition democracy. But it will be just the name of Du Bois, but not the substance of Du Bois. And you did a whole year at 1199 reading Black Reconstruction. And
yeah, I mean, it is terrible the way that they're utilizing it. But I mean, it also shows the desperation that now they're trying to use it to save themselves.
Well, you're right, Joe. I mean, they don't have much. That's what's becoming, ideologically, they don't have much. And this is why I think, everybody tries to say, the Free School is not a huge organization, but it's an influential organization. What gives the Free School some kind of standing in the city, and maybe beyond? The ideas, and we never backed up. We stuck to our guns, and we kept working on things, trying to understand, and bringing in more people to enter into the discussion and hold it. And this is the point of the conferences. The conferences are more than the Free School, because then they allow for greater discussion, other angles, other people. You know what I'm saying? And it's, be it on China, on Baldwin, on Henry Winston, you know what I'm saying? It's ideas, and if you don't believe in ideas, you don't believe in the future. You don't believe in the future. Anybody else want to say? Oh, go ahead.
I was thinking of how this narrative exists today more and more about what democracy is. I was listening to what you were reading out, and there's this idea that so democracy is something that not all people really want, that all and when Du Bois, he defined democracy as the broadest measure of justice to be given to the greatest number of people. And it seems to me that,
Could you repeat that once again, please? Because that might inform our approach to this Bernie Sanders thing.
Right. So, in his essay on the ruling of men in the book Dark Water, he defines democracy as the method that is, it's the method to render the broadest justice to the greatest number of people. I think he chooses these words, and it's deep how he chooses the words. And it seems that today somehow the idea has turned on its head, where we seem to think that democracy is something that is preferred only by a few people, and it seems that you only can be in the ruling class if I mean to say that only by being in the ruling class can you ever not want democracy, because that's when your relation to democracy and justice and power, it's a different relationship whether you're in the ruling class or in the mass of people. And I think I was thinking of it goes back to this article that we had discussed in preschool last year, the Times article which came out after Biden's election regarding this the bipartisan campaign to remove Trump. And their language was the same. It was
Time
about,
magazine.
Yeah, it was about fortifying democracy. Now it seems to depend on how you relate to people. That's how you can define what fortifying democracy is and what's a dictatorship.
Yes. And if I might just add, it's almost without saying it. If you read, by the way, the New York Times op-ed, what's his name? William Edsel. Yeah. If you read that, it's almost as though they're saying, in order to save democracy, we must destroy it. In order to save it, we must destroy it in substance, in essence.
What do you mean by that?
Yes, thank you. This is very important, Jake. It's an irony produced by an ironic situation. The ruling class, who claim to be the defenders of democracy, are literally, when you read these articles and these academic studies and these proposals, are saying, in order to save democracy, it has to be destroyed. The substance of it must be destroyed. Put another way, in order to preserve the rule of the existing ruling elite, we have to destroy democracy for the majority. That's the kind of desperate situation we're in. I know in India, I would be interested if you shared this with Portable, and I know she'll share it with her parents and other people, what their response would be. Because India, you all don't know this kind of crisis of rule, that in order to, quote, save democracy, they must destroy it, which flips on its head the whole argument that the Trump movement represents autocracy and fascism, and we, the liberals, represent the democratic urging, the democratic spirit. But since we have, quote, the moral high ground, and there's always a moral implication, or how would I say, a moral gesturing, a gesture towards morality and higher aims. It pisses me off just to have to say these things. These scumbags claiming morality on their side. So because we have the moral high ground, we will destroy democracy in order to save it as an abstract idea. And believe me, that's on their agenda. That's the meaning of Julian Assange. in order to save freedom of speech, we're going to destroy it. And anybody that would stand up. And let me tell you, they did Du Bois and Robeson and Winston and all of them dirty. But what they're doing to Assange, and they know they're killing this man. He had a minor stroke, by the way. I don't know whether you heard it. And they know they're doing it. And it's the British and American intelligence. The so-called foundation, countries that founded liberal Anglo-Saxon democracy. So, you know, we have so many indications. And it's not I don't like Modi. I think he's, you know, not doing a good job or whatever bullshit. But India's not facing this.
I actually think with the you know, the forces of you know, this liberal force which is trying to shape, you know, this idea of you know, this weird kind of perverted idea of democracy. I mean, I think India is quite safe from it because the liberal class, I mean, they choose to come here and stay here. They don't have any relation to the masses of people in India or anywhere. I don't think they have, at least, you know, in the near future, I don't think they have much scope for, you know, influencing Indian politics.
Yeah, you guys are lucky. Hopefully, see, there are consequences still in India for betrayal. You know what I'm saying? There is still something going, at least I sense when I talk to you all and Nanditha and Raju, that there is still a belief that the people can rule. You know what I'm saying? Even by the elites, even by the Modi party and all of them, you know? But here, this ruling class is completely desperate, completely without principle, and frankly, without boundaries. That's the danger. And the threat, this is beyond fascism. They need to stop using. This is something completely different. Because even when Hitler came to power, or was appointed by Hindenburg, German society, remained intact. The German state was intact. We face a whole different, the implosion. And these pressures of inflation, we talked about that, what inflation does if it is prolonged, and then the rise of violence in the cities, the likes of which we've never seen, and then the COVID pandemic. I mean, it's existential. It's existential. And we have to get ourselves ready for whatever.
Can you, in my mind, I see what you're saying in terms of the destruction of democracy in the name of saving democracy.
Yes.
It kind of, and the justification of, okay, well, they're authoritarian, like the projection, so to speak. Could you talk about how, like, Build Back Better, for example, is part of this destruction of democracy in the name of saving democracy?
Well, see, here, I think, if I might say, because we almost have to do a timeline of, you know, the overthrow of Trump, which was a united ruling class project. Wasn't like one side of the ruling class with Trump, the other side ain't with Trump. No, 90% of the ruling class, the deep state, the billionaires, Wall Street, were against him. We got to get this guy out in the name of democracy, to save democracy, which again is to save the rule of the ruling elite. But now, it's, you know, things speed up sometimes in history, the velocity of events. So we're going from January 20th, maybe you want to say November 2020, but let's say January 20th when Biden becomes president, to now, a little less than a year. Things have moved very rapidly, and I'm calling it collapse, the implosion, put another way, the contradictions have only sharpened. And not just between the people and the ruling elite, but within the ruling elite. You know, we talked about within the Democratic Party. these splits, these factions, who can't find common ground. They'll destroy Kamala Harris, and they are destroying. That's what her disappearance, you know. But then they have no way to address or understand how to rule in a crisis like this. They're totally unprepared. So I think their options are very few. So they have to destroy the essence or substance of democracy, as limited as that was under bourgeois rule. The great democratic movement of our times was the civil rights movement, which was the spirit of expanded democracy. That's what King was. Wasn't this bullshit that they pump up? It was that's what Muhammad Ali represented. You understand? But now a counter-revolution, even more lethal than the counter-revolution against Reconstruction, you know, that Du Bois wrote about. So this ruling class, in order to save itself, will destroy democracy. And that's what I mean by to save itself. I'm sorry.
No. And so you see the, I guess that the continuing manifest, like, and base the ruling class being unable to take care of its citizens today.
Oh no, that's the citizens don't even count.
Yeah.
They don't. Jay, we cannot. I don't think any of us can understand a ruthless group of people who only care about their own power, their own wealth, their own selves. That's all. We don't count. I mean, I think the sooner we get that in our, we don't count. Our fate is in our hands now.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
And to the extent that we swim in the same waters with the masses, we're more safe than if we don't. We do better, and I say this, anybody listening, you can take it like you want. We do better in that mass, those waters that the Trump masses swim in. Because ultimately, that's going to be not just Trump voters, but it's going to be all the people. Because our fates are increasingly the same. Our conditions are increasing. So wherever the people are, that's where I want to swim. I don't want to separate myself from any of the masses. And I'm not going to attack ordinary people in order to protect the elite. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Blaze. I don't need to talk.
Only if you finish, though.
Go ahead. No.
Okay. Just thinking about the question that you posed earlier, how do we understand that betrayal that young people, especially college-educated, feel from the Biden administration? I think one thing they haven't done yet is to connect that betrayal that they've experienced to the Biden administration and the ruling class's betrayal of the working class.
Yeah, that's right. No, not yet.
Not yet. And not that it's impossible, but they haven't yet made that connection.
Yeah.
And you know, in some ways, young college-educated people might be the last ones to understand that. You know what I'm saying?
They're closest to the university.
Yeah, because, you know, they have a little bit of, quote, freedom to not, you know, to party hardy, and not, you know, to do what they do. But young people with children, families, and then the working class, the more stable, experienced, older working people, they feel this in a way that I don't think a lot of young college students do not right now.
They haven't yet looked at the rural Pennsylvania county
No.
that voted for Trump and say, that is the same ruling class betrayal that I have.
That's right.
Not that we can't get there, but.
Yeah, that's right. I think they'll get there, but they're not there yet.
Yeah.
They're not where the masses of working people are. That anger.
And that's that's how they keep the students. That's how Joe Biden keeps the students with the student loan forgiveness idea. That's
But
how
he done took that off the table, hasn't he? That's
It's
off the table.
till 2024.
Just keep way back on
I'm
the
just
table.
looking at it
Certain
again in
things take off the
2024.
table and then bring back,
We'll
you know.
revisit that in 2024 or maybe 2026,
Yeah, right.
if I'm still around.
Right. But also, I think it's an important point you were saying that the U.S. Definitely more than these Asian nations, and certainly maybe even more than the other Western nations, is in a situation where the government is basically at war with the citizenry, waging war on the citizenry.
And the American government has literally said that.
Right.
That we're at war with anybody that goes against this Biden and the ruling class.
Right.
They said that. I mean,
Right.
it's not me. They said it. I mean, does anybody doubt that? They said it.
Yeah.
So what does it mean when the government said we're at war with 74 million of the citizens of this country?
Right.
We're at war with y'all, and y'all a threat more than Islamic terrorism. This is white supremacist terrorism, and we're gonna bring you down with the quickness.
It actually also.
It is. We're in deep doo-doo, as they say in the street. Excuse me, I
Well,
didn't
it
mean
also
to interrupt you.
explains why people say it over and over, even with gun violence in Philadelphia. People are like, why is it that when Rolexes are stolen in Center City, the police can find the people who did it in 3 days? But when black people die every day, like the police, the city, everyone actually will let it happen for as long as it takes to annihilate a whole population of people.
Exactly.
Because the government, the state is at war with its people.
That's right.
But that's why it was interesting to see the chair of the Republican National Party, or
Philadelphia.
Republican National Committee, wrote like an opinion piece for the Philadelphia Inquirer. I thought that was interesting because I think people's eyes are on Philadelphia and also Pennsylvania, obviously, but on Philly as an example of a city controlled by Democrats heavily, but at such war with its own people, and a city in intense civil war. But she made an interesting point around democracy, whereas even if you just take democracy at its narrow Western terms, she says, why is it that the Democrats who are elected to government feel no sense of accountability to the people qualitatively, have no sense of the qualitative issues that you described, like that 31-year-old pregnant woman who was killed, and nothing is done about it, person won't be found. But she said, she was like, isn't it interesting that Mayor Kenny will blame everyone except for himself, and it's his own party for the issues caused. And she even listed, she was like, at this point you can't accept over 2021 Mayor Kenny saying that the pandemic caused gun violence, that the courts have caused gun violence, or that the state legislature not giving the state enough money caused gun violence. At what point do you have to say, as an elected official, that you're accountable to the people, that the government is accountable, even in the narrowest sense of the definition of democracy? There has to be a sense of accountability. Even if you say democracy is elections, you have to say, you're accountable to the people who elected you. And so it was interesting just looking into the future of politics, the forces at play. I think, I don't know, it's just interesting that even the chair of the National Republican Committee is speaking like this to the people of Philadelphia in an op-ed, pretty publicly.
I feel like she was the national.
I think it was a local.
No, she's
Oh, national.
Ronna
I didn't see that.
McDaniel is the national
okay.
Republican chair, and she's a huge Trump, to this day, is pretty loyal to Trump.
This thing of democracy, the justification, democracy and fascism, justify, we'll destroy the democracy to save the democracy from fascism.
Right.
and also because now I'm kind of exposed to how theories of democracy are taught in higher education. I have a very up close experience with that nowadays. But one of the things is, even when it comes to teaching the history of fascism, right, a lot of which is being invoked now, I think it's a crucial point which you said, that Hitler didn't take power, he was appointed to power by the German elite. No, but people don't know that. It's not what's taught. No, fascists don't, it's not like they get a mass base
and take power. That's popular power. They're appointed by an elite to crush mass movements. You know, the German elite, Hitler didn't win any elections. The German elite, to stop the rise of the Communist Party, other popular forces in Germany, they appointed Hitler to power. Similarly, in Italy, this one is actually being invoked more with the so-called January 6th. They're like, oh, it's Trump's March on Washington. They invoke that Mussolini had a march on Rome. But there was no march on Rome. The march on Rome was when Mussolini threatened to march on Rome. The Italian king appointed Mussolini the prime minister of Italy, and then he marched to Rome, quote unquote, on a train. He just bought a train ticket, took straight to Rome to get prime minister. You know, that's not how fascists come to power. It's the same thing now. Like, oh, okay, to stop this mass movement now, you'll basically, in effect, appoint a Biden-type person. You might appoint someone even more ruthless, but it's all being manipulated from the top. And you have other examples in history. It's interesting also, a lot of this stuff happened in the third world, which is now happening here. These so-called fake revolutions, like for example in Iran, the Shah of Iran, when there was a lot of popular discontent, he's like, oh, I'm implementing the white revolution. To avoid a red revolution or a green revolution, a white revolution from above, modernization from above, you get everything you want.
Like they said, why did he even have to go there with the white revolution? But anyway.
I mean, it's the same type of thing. Oh, okay. The elite under the guise of the Democratic Party are going to go do Bernie Sanders' political revolution. Going to bring you democratic socialism from above. As long as they keep power, you don't try to take power. So anyway, we have precedent for this, but a lot of this is based on the manipulation of history, and I mean, again, that's the role of the intellectual. That's the problem with the college-educated class in the society. Also, it's interesting that you have. I mean, because people try to say, okay, the Trump movement, oh, it's not a totally working class movement. You have people who maybe have higher median incomes, but it's interesting how college education is a divide. Because even if you're like you're maybe you have a higher median income, you're a small businessman, but you're not college educated. You're culturally in a lot of ways closer to the working class than a college educated person that might be like, I don't know, working as a librarian or has a job where they may be making less money, but culturally they're closer to this whole professional managerial class conception. So yeah, I mean, that's why it's wrong to say that the elite, that there's a part of the elite that's with Trump. It's not necessarily. I mean, there's some people who have money who are, interestingly now, a lot of people making money with crypto also that are with Trump and trying to help him set up an alternative social media network and all that type of stuff. But they're not part of the elite per se. Culture, education is an important marker of being connected to the elite.
The one business person that they're trying to attack being for Trump is the My Pillow guy.
Yeah, right.
It's the biggest guy they got. My Pillow, man.
We should ban the My Pillow guy from selling his pillows.
Or remember that Four Seasons? They're like, oh, Giuliani's going to do a press conference for the Four Seasons. It's not the hotel, it's a landscaping company. Landscaping. You know.
Y'all want to move on to Larry Krasner?
Absolutely.
Which is very much related to this. As you know, 2 weeks ago now, Larry Krasner held a press conference where he was. No, that's all right.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Praise God.
Yeah.
God bless y'all.
Yeah, God bless you too. Yeah. Larry Krasner 2 weeks ago held a press conference, and in his cool, detached way, proclaimed, as he is welcoming visitors to Philadelphia, you know, pumping up the tourist business.
I react to that really strongly because you're welcoming tourists to Philadelphia and you haven't addressed the citizens.
Okay, hold on, wait a minute.
I'm sorry.
Gonna get to that.
Go. Yeah, I'm sorry.
You're absolutely right. That's the contradiction. And you know, Larry Krasner, in his cool, detached way, proclaimed, there is no problem of crime in the city. We're safe here. And everything is cool. So all y'all from different parts of the country want to visit Independence Hall and all that, come on down. We got your back.
You're right.
And people went off. He said, what? The murder rate is at a record high and shows no signs of abating. And so, in the wake of that, former Mayor Nutter writes an op-ed, and among other things, says that Larry Krasner should apologize to the families of the 500 and at that time 23 people who had been murdered in the city of Philadelphia, and went on to say that his statement was a racist statement. He didn't say it in the harshest language like I'm going to say it in a minute. And then, you know, this mass outcry occurs, and so a week after he makes the initial statement, he comes out on television, a press conference, to apologize. And now the cool, detached Larry Krasner done broke down crying. Yeah, right. I feel you, money. You know, break down. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt nobody's feelings, and yada yada. Yeah. So, but already, as I told you, the great political discontent in the city is at an all-time high, especially among black people, who express this in their own ways. They really do. And they are. It's a withdrawal. It's in churches and communities, around kitchen tables, where people are cursing and saying other things. What the heck is he talking about? And what he was saying, in effect, was this: nothing has changed in the city. Black people are just killing black people. Ain't no problem with that. We got that.
Right. Not downtown.
Or to put it another way, in a more, the way graphic, the way black people, when we talk, it's nothing but the N-words killing other N-words. We don't have anything to worry about. Now, Larry Krasner, when he first ran 4 years ago, was nowhere near winning the election. What got him over the top, one, was an infusion of $1.5 million for one of the foundations connected to the Soros Foundation. But then a shift of black politicians and the black vote towards Larry Krasner. In other words, Larry Krasner won because of the black vote, and only because of the black vote. He is re-elected this last time in November only because of the black vote. Now, Larry Krasner situated himself, by the way, a very small turnout in both primaries. But Larry Krasner situates and defines himself as reforming the criminal justice system and the practices of the DA's office. Very good. Larry Krasner has overturned convictions of people that were serving prison terms who shouldn't have been in jail. The DA's office under Lynn Abrahams, and she had been a long-time DA connected to the most reactionary forces of the police and the courts and others, and the New York Times had defined her in the late 1990s, as the most deadly DA in the country. In other words, she had called for and gotten death penalty convictions and the death penalty for more people than any DA in the country. And then Seth Williams, who followed her, who was black, but was nothing but a bootlicker, and then was arrested for stealing, and he did a bit in prison himself, Now he's very religious and all that, but so this reform-mindedness is a breath of fresh air, He's not going after people because of their race, because of their zip code, and he's trying to have a more fair thing. Now, his office is not staffed by experienced prosecutors. So if you get held up and it don't make the newspaper, you'll be waiting for the next 15 years to have some resolution of it. But, yeah, Jerry is a case. He's still waiting. But the city of Philadelphia, we're experiencing, and it is understood this way, as a literal bloodbath in the black community.
It is.
I sit on well, I guess it's defunct now, but some sort of commission to inform the DA about how to deal, well, it was really Black Lives Matter, police violence and all that, but then it quickly turned into how we're going to deal with all of these murders in the black community. But then it was disbanded right before the election. We ain't been called back together again. I guess, I don't know how I go back on that committee, but anyway. But then, as the furor heats up, then allies of Larry Krasner, especially a good friend of mine, who politically we're not on the same page no kind of way, former Black Panther, named Paula Peoples, writes an op-ed. And it seemed like to be a committee that wrote it. And it seemed to be a PR piece coming out of the DA's office. Larry Krasner is the people's DA. Larry Krasner has let people out of jail who were unjustly incarcerated. Mass incarceration undermined the economic well-being of the black community. All of that is true. Only problem, she didn't connect it to the crime bill of 1994, the Clinton administration of Biden. But nonetheless, all of that is true. But it's begging the question. The question is, you did good, but that doing that good does not nullify the fact that you don't give two damns about the safety of Black Philadelphia, which is also a statement on the governing or ruling class in the city of Philadelphia. The mayor don't care and ain't doing nothing. The city council, they sitting around, I don't know what they're doing, but it ain't no big problem for them. But at the level of the people, it is a problem. People call their city council person. We got a drug house and a gun house right down the corner here. Could you, well, what I would suggest is that you all try to form a committee on your block and confront them. We ain't got no guns, and we got, you know what I'm saying? Y'all need to clean up your own neighborhood. Well, what do we elect your dumb behind for? And the police station right around the corner, and they ain't doing nothing. So there is no social contract where the people's well-being is first. And my friend Paula Peoples arguing this is missing the point. The last point on this, and we've been talking about, you see, by them behaving the way they are, it further erodes the legitimacy of the Democratic Party among the most loyal base, locally and nationally. No other group of people vote 90% for any party the way black people have done over the last 50 years. You know what I'm saying? That kind of loyalty, a kind of loyalty to a fault with Obama. I mean, we had no reason to uncritically do. Loyalty to a fault on the Democrat. It makes us look bad as a people. Goddamn, some opposition somewhere. You know what I'm saying? But now I think we're at that tipping point. I would hope that Larry Krasner's career ends. And I'll tell you why. Yes, I'm happy for the reforms that you're making, and they're just the tip of the iceberg. I'm happy that you gave over 6 boxes of previously unshared evidence on Mumia's case to the defense. I'm happy about that. I'm not happy that you have presented certain obstacles to a new trial. I'm not happy with your lack of transparency on a number of issues, your aloofness. You too smart to get down with the grassroots. I don't like that. But there has to be a point where people say enough is enough. Our people are dying. There is no protection. The quality of life, I don't care whether it's in Cobb's Creek or Strawberry Mansion, we can't go out of our houses. We can't go out of our houses. Now, I have called for, and I told the people, the guy that heads this commission, I said, look, Gregory, his name is Reverend Holster. I said, we got to declare a state of emergency. I told him this over a year ago. A state of emergency. Oh, surprise, surprise. The mayor of San Francisco just did it the other day. And that wasn't over murders. That was over fentanyl. And people peeing outside the city hall. Doing other things. Over but that's considered a quality of life issue enough in San Francisco that they declared a state of emergency. But people oh no, we can't do that because we have to protect due process.
What?
Due
fucking ass. It's already the
due
procedure. Ain't no due process
procedure
anymore.
and not the sub.
When it's convenient.
That's right.
Yeah.
I had even gone further. A limited sense of martial law. That you extract, I know where the gun house, by the way, a lot of guns being used to kill people are rented. You can go to Cat's crib, a gun house, and rent a pistol.
They have assault weapons.
Oh, they have assault
I
weapons?
was reading one of the shootings was an AR-15.
Oh boy. Yeah. So they got all kind of
ammunition also. You need ammunition.
You can buy, like you can buy cigarettes, single cigarettes. You can just buy 5
Loose bullets.
Yeah, loose bullet, loosies.
Wow, yeah.
Well, I'm not going to.
I know
But
it's not
okay, but you know where I know where the gun house is. Not far from me. I don't walk past it. You understand? It's not like, the brothers are just standing outside chatting with each other. No, the brothers ain't just standing outside. You shut it down. And it is so obvious. Take it the other way.
Right.
Just the apocalyptic scenario.
Right.
Suppose black people's killing white people like that. Oh my God, bring in the Army, the Navy, the Marines, shut this down, lock everybody up. But black people killing each other, ain't nothing wrong, come on to Philadelphia. It's normal here. And when he said that, he should pay the ultimate political price. And then, on top of it, I'm looking at a news conference. State Senator Sharif Streep.
Yeah.
Okay, his office and the NAACP office, they right across from Sister Muhammad's kitchen. Up at where we go to eat once in a while after free school. Okay, well, at least me and Brandon do. He can eat too. But they give you a lot of food, Jake. I think. And okay, for somebody at night shot up these offices. It wasn't. I don't think it was a serious spray, but it was at night. I don't know what the message, what it was. Nobody was killed. Nobody was shot. Senator Sharif Street holds a press conference. Okay, I'm down. I'm not going to question motives or intentions, but I'll just say he's a politician. Okay, at the president, and he's talking about what happened, why they had the NAACP, his office, city council woman, Sharice Park. They're all up there so they can service people. If the state senator can't do it, maybe the city councilwoman can do it. Blase. And that this was, kind of an extension of the gun violence that we've been seeing in the city. So you have the sheriff of the city, you have Senator Sharif, you have the city councilwoman, and I look, and here's Larry Krasner standing up there. Oh, hometown now, since your political chestnuts are in the fire, or since your behind is up against the wall, I don't want to curse, but you get my point. Now you showing up. Now you so sympathetic. So, but none of them calls for the type of solution that is right in front of our faces and available. Number one, a state of emergency. Number two, the politicians, the civil society calls for a convention of the people at the convention center to say, in effect, that the government and the people will mobilize to shut this down. We will bring political and moral pressure. In other words, where the bum who is the DA, ain't no problem, we will say as the people, there is a problem. And anyone that does this to black people is an enemy of black people. I don't care if you're crazy or what. You have committed violence against the people. We will not accept it. That at least twice a week, people will take to the streets in their neighborhoods and call upon the police. That's the drug house. That's the killer. That's his mother. That's his grandmother. That's his father. That's who's protecting him. The people can only overcome fear if they are united. The people must. Now, Senator Sharif, I'm going to Harrisburg tomorrow, the first thing in the morning, and I'm going to bring back money to this and do that. All the money in the world ain't going to solve this. Midnight basketball ain't going to solve this. It is only the political and moral force of the people with the government that will do it. We have to shut it down. Now, my friend, everybody knows Cynthia. Cynthia said, Tony, all we can do is pray. And I said, yes, we must pray, but we must do things. We must act. Prayer is a part of it. Prayer unites people. Prayer encourages people to do good, to think good. But we must act. The churches, the Nation of Islam, the other mosques, the unions, the organized force of the people, and we cannot see. Some people say forget sociology right now. Sociology ain't gonna help you. You know what I'm saying? Yes, I am interested in a discourse that will diffuse a certain level of anger. I'm for that. But I'm not going to let you kill somebody before I talk to you. I'm going to get you away from the people where I can talk to you. And I'm not letting you out on bail for $1,500. You know, because you're only killing black people. And everybody knows that. That it's, if the shoe were reversed, no, I won't say 200, let's say half, no, kill 3 white people. 3 out of 530. It's a whole different response. Am I like,
No.
am I invoking the race card inappropriately? I don't think so.
That's what happened.
No, kill 3.
Yeah. That was the temple. Exactly. The temple.
Get a but kill 3.
Go ahead. Excuse me.
Hey, you think Larry Krasner, oh, it ain't no problem, we got this. No, we have to do something. And black, white, or otherwise have to pay a political penalty for this kind of abuse and trivialization of a great people who put you dumb behind in office. So that's what I'm calling for. I feel it personally because my daughter and my 2 little granddaughters, I have to tell them, look, when you come out of the house, Nicole, you come out first and look both ways. Have a plan of how to get out of your house into your car. And then how to get out of your car back in your house. Because there's a drug and gun house down the street and everybody knows who populates that house. Do I have to wait until they kill somebody or hurts a child to do something? You see what I'm saying? This is very, and I forgive my speaking word, this is so deep and emotional in the black community for Larry Krasner in office because of the black vote and only because of the black. He don't get from here to the corner without the black vote. Nobody knew him from Buster. You understand? He ain't never did nothing. I think he worked for Community Legal Services. You understand? Put him in there as an act of good faith, and then as soon as you get in there, we facing an existential crisis. You know, black folk are the most organized group of people in the society. This is sociological studies. Black folk organize. But when there is this kind of violence, we can't, or it disorganizes us. You can't come out of the house and come to church on Wednesday night to talk about whatever, to hold Bible study. These are the things, the foundations of organization. You know, you can't come out of the house to go to choir practice. You can't go to the union meeting because you don't know what's going to happen. You see what I'm saying? It disorganizes a community whose existence depends upon their being organized and face-to-face talking. You know what I'm saying? We talk, you know, singing, doing things that we do. We don't have the money, and just to betray us like that, pay a price, Larry. Get out. We don't need you. We don't need that. I don't give a fuck what your reform agenda is. Because now it turns out that your reform agenda is all about you and your political career. That's why you broke down crying, because you might be at the end of the road, homie. And I hope so. Pay a price. And that dumb mayor will. You see what I'm saying? But see, this is where we are. And like Joe said, ain't the substance, ain't the procedure, it is the substance. What is the contract with the people? So that's where we're going to have to go. But everybody in the free school, be careful. Be careful. You can't do everything you want to do. If you like to ride skateboards, give it up for the time being. You know what I'm saying? I mean, them bikes ain't going to get it right now, as I always tell Serafina. But go ahead.
I don't like that, but no, it's just like even in the homes, you get shot in the home. And it's just this whole thing with gentrification. It really comes hand in hand with what you're saying. And you know, that brings up the universities.
I just say one thing, just apropos what you just, well, you know where I live, where I grew up. You know, Richard Allen Projects was the first federally financed public project. And really it was all black because no white people wanted to live in there pretty much. But it was beautiful. But it was where a slum was, but now you had nice houses, you know, public houses. Many people, like I always talk, hard bop, the jazz genre. Part of the where it originates is Richard Allen Project. McCoy, Tyner, John Coltrane, Lee Morgan, Spanky DeBress, I could go on and on. Bobby Timmons, you know, that's where they practiced at, that's where they were. Miles and Dizzy Gillespie and Art Blakey and them, they would come and sit outside Spanky's father and mother's crib. Because that's where them cats practice at, because Spanky's father had a piano in there. And so they'd be listening, Miles and them, to see who they was going to cop, you know, to be in their groups, you know? And all of that, Bill Cosby come out of Richard Allen. A lot of people. And people lived, you know, working people. And they went to work, they had the community center. I know when our little Boy Scouts, we go up there and all this type of thing. And I watched how they let heroin take over. When I say what wasn't inevitable, when you let the drug dealers, now the heroin thing back then ain't nothing compared to this. But you and then you erode, and then people can't live, they move out. Everybody didn't want to move out. They liked Richard Allen. They liked the community.
Yeah.
They had a beautiful, recreation hall, and there would be dances and groups singing and all, you know, things that people, and you know, the weight of a community of all these people, genius comes out and all of that. They let heroin, and then then they let crack take over, and then they say, we can't do nothing with it, tear it down. You know, they could have. I saw it take over a neighborhood. Didn't have to. They let it. And now, whenever, and government has a way of backing off when it's black folk, and we know it too damn well. And ain't no apology, ain't no justification. You know, that Paula Peoples writing that article, which I don't think she completely wrote. I think it was a group thing, and other sound like a PR piece out of the DA's office. Larry Krasner, what you said in the face of this existential crisis cannot be justified. Our quality of life, the quality of life of our children is being impaired. It has to be stopped. I don't mean to touch you.
No, I was just mentioning it.
And of course, where I live is heavily gentrified. Went from 90% black to now we down to about 30% black. Ain't nobody shooting down there either. They keep that up the way. You know what I'm saying? Ain't no shooting down there. I feel, you know, like, hey, I could sit on the steps, you know? But if I lived up a little bit, and I know where the gun house is. I know it ain't nobody hiding, ain't nobody underground. Yeah. And there's a shootout between the cats at Richard Allen and dudes over at Pentown. And a cat from Richard Allen named Michael Muhammad, who was, you know, like kind of being the mediator. I'm going to work with the brothers and all that. They killed him down there a few weeks ago. 13 people have been killed back and forth. Now, I mean, hey man, it can be stopped. You can diffuse it. You can diffuse it. I'm standing waiting for a bus the other day. About 6 or 7 kids, young, walking down, but I know
Yeah.
what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
I know what you got.
Yeah.
You know, if I step to y'all, you can't do nothing with me just, physically, but,
That's it.
and then bam, bam, and I'm gone. And you can stop it. They could stop it. What are y'all doing? This is school day. Boom. Y'all coming with us. Lock them up. See what's what. Where are your parents? You got to do it that way. You cannot allow a people to live under this threat of death and fearing for your sons. If you got a son today, okay, maybe we'll talk, it's a little late, let's talk about quickly the end on bell hooks. Is that,
Oh, yeah.
unless somebody got
Well,
something to say.
I just wanted to add in
Yeah.
Eric Hudson, who's actually from Chicago, so I'd actually be interested to hear what he has to say about Chicago too. But he says a question for perhaps another show or session is what is to be done.
Yeah.
Clearly, as you also elegantly stated, the U.S. empire is collapsing at a mind-numbing pace, and hashtag Jim Crow Joe Biden is compensating by choking out and starving us out, aka the masses, for corporate gain until there is nothing left. But for us, radicals organizing and providing mutual aid in our communities, what is to be done now that this illegitimate government run by the kleptocracies has intensified its systematic looting of its internal colonies, including the south and west sides of Chicago, New Orleans, Newark, New York, etc. What is to be done and how do we connect?
Yeah, this is going to be a big question. And we'll answer that the next time around because increasingly we move to solutions. Go ahead, Jay.
Before you moved on to bell hooks, I have a question. And you're right. I feel like you're right on this question of like how to deal with these all this crime. There has to pump a brake. It's just getting out of control, and the people agree with you. Many of my coworkers, they talk about, I wish I could just put on a vigilante costume and beat up some of these guys, or I wish I could, or it's time, or I got robbed, or da. That's true. I guess what I'm trying to make sense of is like, well, what happens to these young cats? 'Cause it's like
Right.
the same thing.
That's right. You're right. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, you're right. You see, but you have to disarm them.
That's right.
You have to neutralize them before you can enter into talk therapy.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying? You can't allow, I don't care if you're 13 or 113. I can't let you just, just because you think you're just going to empower you.
Boom.
People said, we want the police out of our schools, but you're not a teacher in there.
Right.
You're not a student in there.
Right. You don't have to worry
And
about
what, you're a social worker, you're going to take, no, man, we're dealing with, okay, this is not a creation of the people. This is a creation of an unjust criminal system. And what it has done, the collapse of public education, the undermining of sports and music and art and all the other things where you develop young people, yes. But shit, do I have to wait till the revolution to say that my children shouldn't be killed?
Right.
This is where you face the practical side. Is the moral thing to do not to do anything until you can solve everything?
Yeah.
Don't listen to them people. That's the